Chapter 1939. Dereliction of Duty. Indeed, dereliction of duty. As mentioned earlier, the betrayers were experts who escaped from the destroyed cities of the Baruba Empire and surrendered to Dark Scorpion in an attempt to save their own lives. In the end, they snuck into the capital and betrayed the human race to work for the magical beasts. These traitors who came from other cities could only be ordinary cultivators who were born and developed in the city, or they could only be people like me, Lena, who were sent by the three great families to manage this city. Even if the ordinary cultivators snuck into the capital, they wouldn't be able to do anything without background, status, or identity. That was why the traitors from the three major families were the ones they needed to be wary of. Yesterday, the upper echelons in the palace hall were all people with extremely high status and authority in the three major clans. People like them couldn't be sent to other cities. Not only would it seem like they were being exiled, it would also be a waste of their talents. That was why Coterie made everything clear in front of so many upper echelons. There were two reasons for doing so. Firstly, it was impossible for these high-ranking officials to be traitors since they were not transferred from other cities. Secondly, the traitors were mostly from the three major clans, and their identities and numbers were unknown. It was impossible to rely on a group of girls or a limited number of people like Geta to secretly find them. They could only rely on these high-ranking officials to act together. That way, it would be much more efficient to find the traitors. They had to get rid of the tumors as soon as possible. Of course, by revealing such important information in front of so many people, the chances of the news being leaked would be much greater. At that time, it would cause even more trouble. But in the end, after careful consideration, Coterie decided to reveal it. After all, if she didn't do this, it would be hard to find the hidden threats, and sooner or later, the Baruba Empire would be dealt a heavy blow. She believed that Geta understood this as well. That was why Coterie told Geta everything that had happened. She also had the intention of letting Geta clean up the mess himself. And the facts proved that Geta was indeed the emperor of the Baruba Empire. Geta had already guessed the reason why Coterie had revealed the information so openly. That was why he solemnly ordered that no one was to reveal what they heard in the hall to anyone. After leaving the hall, he ordered his personal guards to keep an eye on the higher-ups. He had to keep all the secrets in the mouths of the higher-ups. However, since Xieming had personally taken action, it proved that there was still a flaw in Gu Da's secret arrangements, and the news was lost. That was why Coterie said that she had failed in her duty. Geta naturally knew what Coterie meant. For a moment, he was filled with self-blame and guilt. That's not right. Suddenly, Kaluan seemed to have realized something. The higher-ups who attended the meeting yesterday were all secretly monitored by His Majesty's personal guards. If they leaked the information, the personal guards would definitely report it to His Majesty. That's right. Will pointed at the group of girls and shouted angrily. The only people who aren't being watched by the guards are you. As soon as these words came out, the air immediately filled with an oppressive feeling. Era. There was a smile on Kurumi's face, but there was no smile in her eyes. Are you suspecting us? Then can you prove that you are innocent? Ubai said coldly. You're the only ones who aren't being watched. Toka and Meijio, who were rather angry at being suspected, wanted to say something, but were stopped by Origami and Kurumi. There's no need to argue with them. Coterie didn't even look at Geta, Kaluan, Will, and Gobai. Instead, she explained to Toka and Meijio. Let them be. Our goal is only Xieming. The survival of the Baruba Empire has nothing to do with us. You, Kaluan, Will, and Gobai glared angrily at the group of girls. Before they could say anything, Geta stood up with Jaffer in his arms. He lifted his head and looked at Xieming, who was watching them fight amongst themselves with interest. He spoke in a deep voice. How do you know that the Guardian isn't in the capital? You want to know? The corners of Xieming's mouth curled up. There's no harm in telling you. Although I don't know who leaked the news, the human who brought the news to me said that he has a good friend who seems to be working for some king. Last night, he got drunk with him and said that the guardian deity is not in King City. At this moment, everyone understood. The one who leaked the information wasn't the higher-ups of the Baruba Empire who were being watched by the guards. Instead, it was someone in the guards. Perhaps Gutta didn't expect that it was the guards he sent to spy on the higher-ups of the Baruba Empire who leaked the information. Perhaps this was the so-called impossible-to-guard-against situation. Who leaked the information to you? Kaluan didn't apologize to the group of girls who were suspected by them. Instead, the veins on his forehead bulged, and he growled, "I'm going to tear that traitor into pieces. You want to kill the human who brought the information to me?" Siaming waved his arm as though he wasn't interested. "Then you can search the rubble around you. Maybe you can find it." Wah! Everyone sucked in a cold breath. At Siaming's words, they finally remembered that the traitors were all still in the capital. In other words, Siaming had attacked them as well. "You," Will clenched his fists. "Didn't you accept the traitor's surrender? So, didn't I give them a chance to live?" Siaming nodded matter-of-factly. "As long as they live, I won't kill them. Although I just made the decision." Despicable. Goodbye cursed without hesitation. As expected, magical beasts can't tolerate humans. That's not necessarily true. Siaming laughed out loud. "If the great Lord Beast God decides to let the humans live, we will still restrain ourselves a little and keep the humans as livestock instead of killing them all." "Bastard." This time even Gutta bellowed. "The Guardian won't let you go. You'd better take care of yourselves first." Siaming sneered and spread his arms. "Come, my brethren. Roar, roar, roar." The charging magical beast army finally arrived at the scene. They trampled mercilessly on the rubble of the city walls, charged into the ruined capital, and pounced on the fallen city guards. Even though Siaming said that he wouldn't kill the traitors as long as they survived, he only said that he wouldn't kill them and didn't say that he wouldn't allow the magical beast to kill them. If he allowed the magical beast army to go on a killing spree, none of the dying humans would survive, right? Swish! All of a sudden, in one of the corners of the capital, a series of air-piercing sounds echoed. The magical beast army that pounced on the city guards came to a halt and looked over. Not far away, streams of light flew out from the rubble. The streams of light were surrounded by a protective shield made of green crystals. That was the Tertori, domain at will. These streams of light were none other than the 5,000 Misaka sisters. The Misaka sisters who cast the Tertori, domain at will, all flew over and landed behind Kotori, Kumi, Toka, Miko, Origami, and Yoshino. Their identical appearances and strange outfits stunned Siaming and surprised Gutta and the others. That was because these Misaka sisters, who could only exert the strength of a level 8 expert, were also unscathed. This was something that even the peak level 8 powerhouses in the capital couldn't do. There are actually so many humans who are unscathed, and they're as weak as ants. Siaming frowned for a moment, but his expression soon relaxed. "That's good too. My brethren can have some fun too." On the other hand, Gutta, Kluin, Will, and Jebi were overjoyed. With 5,000 level 8 powerhouses around, they could at least stop the magical beast army and protect the city guards of the Baruba Empire. However, Gutta and the others' plan was too perfect. Origami's cold words sent them into the abyss. Everyone returned to Fraxinus. Gather and await orders. Gutta, Kaluin, Will, and Jebi were stunned. Chapter 1940. Compared to the endless horde of magical beasts. If 5,000 Misaka sisters were thrown into the horde of magical beasts, they would be drowned by the saliva of each magical beast. It would seem that the Misaka sisters would not be of much use. However, numbers are not everything. Even though there were only 5,000 Misaka sisters, which was nothing compared to the horde of magical beasts, each of them could unleash the power of a level 8 magical beast. If one were to count carefully, even though the magical beast horde was innumerable, there were only 3,000 to 4,000 level 8 magical beasts, which was even fewer than the Misaka sisters. As mentioned earlier, a level 7 powerhouse could easily stop a group of 10,000 level 5 powerhouses. In terms of level 8 powerhouses, a level 8 powerhouse could also stop a group of 10,000 level 6 powerhouses. Therefore, if the 5,000 Misaka sisters were to join the battle, the magical beast horde would definitely be stopped if the level 9 magical beast didn't join the battle. At that time, the defenders of the Baruba Empire would have enough time to wait for reinforcements and retreat from the battlefield. Even though the Baruba Empire's capital had been destroyed, as long as there were still people who could fight, the Baruba Empire would not be destroyed. At least that was what Gutta, Kluin, Will, and Jebi planned to do. However, Gutta's group of 4 was completely dumbfounded by Origami's order. Everyone returned to Fraxinus and await orders? What was the meaning of this? This question didn't last long before Gutta and the others came to their senses and understood the meaning of the origami phrase. Origami's meaning was very simple. She wanted the Misaka sisters to retreat. Wait, Kaluan was the first to shout. We can't retreat. Kotori, Kurumi, Toka, Miko, and Shiba ignored Kaluan's shout. Origami was the only one who looked at Kaluan with a calm gaze. The calm expression in her blue eyes made Kaluan's heart skip a beat. Origami's words were also very simple. Why? Why? Before Kaluan could say anything, Will shouted impatiently. Isn't that obvious? If you retreat, what will happen to the survivors in the city? Survivors from King's City? Origami's face was calm, but every word he said struck a chord in the hearts of the Baruba Empire's leaders. What does that have to do with us? What do you mean by that? Gobai shouted furiously. Are you trying to run away? As soon as Gobai's voice fell, the group of girls suddenly turned their heads and stared at Gobai. Whether it was Kotori and Origami, Toka and Meijio, or the 4 Bakufu, all of them made Gobai's body tremble. Kurumi's eyes were filled with killing intent and hostility, causing Gobai's pupils to shrink and his body to tense up. Perhaps you high and mighty people have gotten used to giving orders, or perhaps the Baruba Empire has already treated women as servants. Kotori spoke in an emotionless voice. However, I must remind you that we are not your servants, but the lifesavers that you begged to stay behind. Only then did Kluin, Will, and Gobai realize that their tone just now was too much like an order. They were speechless. However, it was as Kotori had said. The 3 of them were Type 9 powerhouses and were used to giving orders. Due to the Baruba Empire's patriarchal culture, they had gotten used to seeing women as lower than themselves. Originally, Kluin, Will, and Gobai wouldn't have used such a tone in front of people of similar status. But the strange thing was that these girls were really too young, not giving off the feeling of being unfathomable powerhouses of the Ninth Step. Thus, out of habit, Kluin, Will, and Jebi exposed their deep-rooted way of doing things. But you guys can't just retreat like that. Kaluan hurriedly spoke up. Aren't we on the same side? Kwang San lightly covered the corner of her mouth. Her smile was slightly sinister. First, you suspected us, then you gave us orders. Now that we're in danger, you still dare to say that we're on the same side? I didn't expect the Type 9 powerhouses of the Baruba Empire to be so thick-skinned. Kaluan, Will, and Gobai wanted to say something, but before they could, Kotori waved her hand. I've said it before, the Baruba Empire's survival has nothing to do with us. Kotori declared without mercy. The moment you started suspecting us, our partnership was already over. Since you never thought of respecting us, there is no need for us to protect you. The Baruba Empire brought this upon itself. You have no one to blame but yourself. Kaluan, Will, and Gobai's minds went blank, and they lost all their thoughts. Cooperation was over. No need to protect them? In other words, these people are not going to make a move? You can't do this. Gobai yelled at the top of his lungs. If the Baruba Empire is destroyed, the humans will lose a huge portion of their strength. How are we going to deal with the magical beast army then? Without the Beast King, the magical beast army will disband on its own. Origami said indifferently, her words shocking Kaluan, Will, and Gobai. And the Beast King will be killed by us. Yu will let out a question that was no different from mocking them. That was to be expected. Siaming was a pseudo-demigod powerhouse. Although he wasn't a true demigod, he wasn't someone 5 or 6 Type 9 powerhouses could deal with. Now, the girls were saying that they would be the ones to kill Siaming. Wasn't that a joke? Of course, it didn't matter if Kaluan, Will, or Jebi wanted to laugh at the girls. Their previous actions had made the girls give up on the idea of saving the Baruba Empire. Origami continued to give orders. Everyone retreat. The Misaka sisters didn't say anything. Instead, they activated their thrusters and flew toward the floating plaza where Fraxinus was parked. Wait, Kalun, Will, and Jebi stared at the Misaka sisters who were retreating from the scene angrily. At that moment, Gudda, who had been silent all this time, sighed. Indeed, this is the Baruba Empire's own fault. I was the one who begged you to stay, yet you were treated like this. I even allowed the news to leak. I hesitated when others suspected you, and I didn't choose to trust you. I've long since failed as an emperor. Gudda stood up as he said this. His eyes were filled with determination. Now that things have come to this, I can't thank you enough for your willingness to stop the Beast King. We will take care of the magical beast army ourselves. Your Majesty, Kalun, Will, and Gudda wanted to say something, but Gudda had made up his mind. You have to bear the consequences of your own actions. Have you lost even this little bit of dignity? Kalun, Will, and Gudda's faces froze. They lowered their heads and fell silent. Then, they silently stood by Gudda's side and cast their gazes towards the endless horde of magical beasts ahead. Father, Jaffar's weak voice sounded from Gudda's arms. He struggled out of Gudda's embrace and stood up. Leave the people in the city to me. You can focus on the magical beast army. Only then did Gudda, Kalun, Will, and Gudda's expressions become much better. Are you done? In midair, Siaming looked down at the group of people below. You can continue if you're not done. I don't mind waiting a little longer. After all, it's not fun to end it too early, is it? Although Siaming said that, he gently waved his hand. Immediately, a few blurs flashed through the air and landed on the ground, appearing before Gudda and the other three. They were 7 magical beasts that were over 3 meters tall and as large as buildings. 7 magical beasts of the 9th level. Roar. The roars of the 7 class 9 magical beasts mixed together, turning into a sound wave that blew through the surroundings. It made Gudda, Kalun, Will, and Gudda become extremely stern. After all, not only did they have to deal with an endless horde of magical beasts, but they also had to deal with 7 magical beasts of the 9th level. R1152. Chapter 1941. Leaving aside how Gudda, Kalun, Will, and Gudda were going to fend off the 7-level 9 magical beasts and the entire magical beast army, Siaming raised his eyes and glanced at the retreating Misaka sisters. He didn't chase after them. Instead, he lowered his gaze and looked at the group of girls standing on the ground. He raised his eyebrows. What? Aren't you going to help them? Siaming pretended to be kind and asked. Facing 7 class, 9 magical beasts, and an entire magical beast army at the same time, even if the 4 humans are class 9 powerhouses, it's still very dangerous. Are you done? Kotori smiled and said, You can continue if you're not done. We don't mind waiting for you for a while. After all, Kurong San laughed along with him. It won't be fun if it ends too early, right? The smile on Siaming's face gradually disappeared when he heard the girls use the exact words he had said not long ago. He looked at the girls below with a cold glint in his eyes. Humans, it's not a good choice to anger me. Regardless of whether we anger you or not, you don't intend to let any human life go, do you? Origami said in a colder tone than Siaming. Long? Wind? Since we're going to die anyway, why don't you let others anger you? Siaming pondered for a moment before he nodded. That's true. Since I intend to kill you all, I'll kill you all. Since I intend to anger you, it's nothing. Humans, do you need me to give you some time event? Kotori, Kurumi, Toa, Miko, Origami, Yoshino, and the other girls looked at each other and laughed in unison. No need. As soon as he finished speaking, a burst of dazzling light burst out from the girls' bodies. The sudden glare made Siaming frown. He took a step back and dodged the glare that was aimed at his eyes. He turned his head and looked at the center of the glare. At the center of the blinding light, the appearance of the 6 girls had changed completely. Toa's clothes were made of cloth and metal. She was wearing light armor that looked like a princess's dress. The skirt was made up of an incredible light film, as if it was a crystal that was illuminated by various rays of light from different directions. She was also holding a spike-shaped greatsword in her hand. She looked like a princess. She looked like a heroic knight. The clothes on the four bunnies had also changed into raincoats that were green with some white or other colors mixed in with the raincoats. There was a pair of cute bunnies on the hood. She had a bunny tail on her back. She was riding a huge bunny doll. She looked like she walked out of a fairy tale. Kurumi was wearing a black and red gothic princess dress. Her hair was tied into a ponytail, and her golden eyes were exposed to the air. She looked both strange and charming, and no one could take their eyes off her. Kotori was floating in the air. Her body was surrounded by flames. She looked like she was stepping on a flying flame. Half of her white feather dress was made of flames. A veil wrapped around her body like a fairy's feather dress. She wore a horn ornament on her head. Her red eyes seemed to have flames burning in them. She looked very dreamy. Meijio's tall and perfect figure had long been covered by a gorgeous dress that seemed to be formed from light particles. There was a huge organ floating behind her, and a keyboard that looked like the keys of a piano floated in front of her. She looked like a celebrity who was about to sing, and her entire body shone with a moving radiance. As for Origami, her slender and soft body fully displayed her beauty due to her exposed uniform. She had an X-shaped thruster on her back and a huge cannon in her hand. Although she didn't look as dreamy as the other elven girls, her beauty didn't diminish at all. Looking at the group of girls gradually revealing themselves in the strong light and sensing the powerful spiritual energy or demonic energy around them, Xiaming was stunned for a moment and stood up in surprise. "You're not humans?" This sentence was naturally directed at the elven girls other than Origami. It was clear that Dark Scorpion, who couldn't detect any trace of human scent from the elven girls after they unleashed their powers, was able to see through their true identities with a keen sense of smell of magical beasts. However, the elven girls didn't care about that at all. Whoosh! At that moment, apart from Meijio, Kotori, Kurumi, Toka, Origami, and the huge rabbit plushie, the five of them split up and rushed towards Dark Scorpion, who was floating in the air. Oomph! Xiaming snorted coldly when he saw that the group of girls had taken the initiative to attack. He raised his hand and pointed. 5 pitch-black beams of light shot out from his hand. They tore through space and shot towards the group of girls. The group of girls immediately flew into the sky together, and their bodies were abnormally agile as they danced in the air. In the next moment, the pitch-black beam of light passed through the place where the group of girls had been, but with a turn, it continued to chase after the group of girls. From those pitch-black light beams, the group of girls felt an extremely threatening power, and immediately they felt some pressure in their hearts. Oomph! Kotori stepped on flames and spun. She dodged the pitch-black beams with an acrobatic flying maneuver. It doesn't matter how powerful it is. It's useless if it can't hit. "Miss Origami," Korongsen shouted with a serious face as she retreated. "You're the fastest. We'll be responsible for diverting his attacks. You find an opportunity to attack." Origami didn't say anything. She just nodded indifferently. Her body tensed up, and under the effect of the thrusters on her back, she shot towards Xiaming again. "Watch me." On the ground below, Meijio, who was standing in front of a huge pipe organ, began to gently slide her slender fingers on the keyboard of light around her body. She played a smooth and beautiful tune. The army destroyer songstress, Gabjapple, Rondo. All of a sudden, a series of cylindrical objects that resembled those on a pipe organ extended out of space. The front end of the cylindrical objects was aimed directly at Dark Scorpion, and invisible sound waves rippled through the air as Meijio played the zither. Xiaming didn't seem to have expected this type of attack. He was caught off guard and didn't react in time, allowing the sound waves of the rondo to pass through his body. Boom! As if a heavy mountain was pressing down on him, Xiaming, who was suspended in the air, tilted his body and couldn't move for a moment. Meijio's rondo was supposed to be an offensive move, but when used on Dark Scorpion, it became a restraining move. From this, one could see how powerful a pseudo-demigod powerhouse was. It's not over yet. However, Meijio's real goal wasn't to attack Xiaming. She crossed her hands and played on the keyboard in front of her. The smooth and beautiful tune suddenly had a hint of bravery. March of the Destroyer's Songstress. The sound waves reverberated again. This time, it didn't affect Xieming. Instead, it affected the girls, causing a powerful force to surge out of their bodies. Even their spiritual power was strengthened. The March of the Army Destroyer Songstress has the effect of enhancing all aspects of the target's abilities. Originally, Mei Jiu couldn't play two different pieces of music at the same time, but ever since she broke through to the 9th level, Mei Jiu's usage of the Army Destroyer Song Girl had also increased by several levels. Now, she could play two pieces of music at the same time, and even 3 was no problem. Xieming's expression turned cold when he saw that the girl's speed, movements, and strength had increased significantly. He suddenly straightened his body. Bang! It was just a simple movement of straightening his body, but the sound waves of the rondo, which pressed down on Xieming like a heavy mountain, were immediately blown up in a muffled sound. Immediately afterward, Xieming waved his hand, and the surrounding space twisted slightly. A terrifying force brewed within. Chapter 1942. In that instant, all the young ladies felt a sense of crisis bursting out from the bottom of their hearts. Even Origami, who was charging straight at Dark Scorpion, slowed down significantly. Her expression, which rarely showed any emotions in the past, changed slightly. Just as Origami was hesitating if he should abandon charge, a petite figure suddenly appeared in front of Origami, riding on a gigantic rabbit plushie. It was none other than Yoshino and the angel who had transformed into Yoshino, the tranquil puppet. Defense. Leave it to me. Yoshino inserted her hand into the back of Yoshino, who had transformed into the tranquil puppet, as though inserting her hand into an electric wire. A rare look of determination appeared on her delicate, adorable face. Attack. I'll leave it to you, Miss Origami. Origami stared fixedly at the determination on Yoshino's petite face, which usually wore a timid expression. She didn't say a word, but the thruster engine on her back was suddenly activated to the maximum power, transforming her into a stream of light that flashed across the sky and shot toward Dark Scorpion. Looking at the scene of Origami dashing toward him, Dark Scorpion let out a snort of laughter as though he couldn't care less. Meanwhile, the distorted space around them fluctuated more violently. As Dark Scorpion spread open his palm and pointed his fingers at Origami, an unusually viscous black mist surged out of the distorted space, swirled slightly, and coalesced into a strange, black, ghost claw. In a whoosh sound, the ghost claw streaked across the void and arrived before Origami in a flash. Facing this sudden, swift attack, Origami's expression changed slightly again. However, she didn't choose to retreat. Instead, she turned stern and the thruster on her back increased its thrust. Instead of retreating, she charged forward. As the two of them approached each other, the strange ghost claw also quickly arrived in front of Origami. Origami could even smell the stench and rotting smell coming from it. He believed that in the next second, this terrifying and strange ghost claw would land on Origami's body. At the critical moment, Yoshino finally moved. Sadkiel. The huge rabbit plushie's eyes glinted in a scarlet glint. It lifted its head, and a white beam of light containing an extremely cold temperature blasted out of its mouth. Wherever it passed, the moisture in the air instantly turned into ice particles that fell to the ground. The white beam of light containing an extremely cold temperature flashed across the sky, appearing in front of Origami before the ghost claw that attacked her. It stuck between her and the ghost claw, came to a halt, and exploded abruptly. Boom! The white light turned into a cold mist amidst the explosion. In the mist, snowflake-like ice crystals appeared out of thin air and combined together to form a huge hexagonal ice crystal. The ghostly claw landed heavily on the ice crystal, causing a burst of ice shards and sparks. Before the collision between the two could form a barrier, the ice crystal suddenly changed its direction and tilted slightly to the side. The ghost claw collided with the ice crystal in a violent friction. Following the direction of the ice crystal, the ghost claw also changed its direction. It skimmed across the air and shot into the distance, disappearing from sight. At that moment, the ice crystal shattered on its own as though it had completed its mission. Origami rushed to the back of the ice crystal, shuttled through the shattered ice crystal, and continued to charge at Xiaming without slowing down. Xiaming narrowed his eyes and let out a sneer. He swung his arm, and like a cannon, the distorted space erupted with a black radiance that coalesced into a pitch-black beast claw that was even larger than the ghost claw from before. Like a fishing net, the beast claw brought about a strong, corrosive wind that enveloped Origami. Hiya! Facing this attack that was even more ferocious than before, just as Origami was about to react, a delicate shout accompanied by a figure appeared at the side of the huge beast claw. It was none other than Toka, who wielded the spike-shaped sword. Sandalphon. He raised his hand, and with a move, the angel named Sandalphon slashed down heavily. With the support of its owner's strength and spiritual power, it was like a flash of sword light that landed on the giant beast's claw. Clang! Amidst the loud sound like the ringing of a bell, the shockwave also erupted. The huge beast claw was heavily smashed away by the huge sword, deviating from its trajectory. Following the path of the previous ghost claw, it also shot into the distance, disappearing from the scene. 10 incense was also sent flying by the terrifying rebounding force. She only managed to stabilize herself after drawing a long air wave in the air. Her arm that was holding the sword was faintly numb. So painful. 10 Fragrance's hand that was holding the sword was constantly trembling. Traces of pain also appeared on her beautiful face. Clearly, the reaction force was extremely great. If it were an ordinary person who suffered such an attack, the web between their thumb and forefinger would have split open, right? Oomph. Xiaming's expression gradually turned impatient as his attacks were blocked again and again. It was as though he didn't want to continue playing anymore. Gazing at Origami, who was charging toward him, he leaned forward slowly like a wild beast about to pounce on its prey. I don't have time to play with you guys who I don't know what kind of creatures you are. Dark Scorpion stared intently at the Origami as he spoke. With a sudden movement, he disappeared on the spot. I'll get rid of you first. Xiaming's voice was still reverberating through the air when a claw-shaped hand appeared beside Origami without any warning. It was aimed directly at Origami's throat, and it squeezed mercilessly toward her. It was clearly a very ordinary hand. There were no traces of combat aura or mana on it. It gave off a very ordinary feeling. However, Origami did not dare to be careless when she felt the strong wind coming from beside her. Zafkiel, bullet of 7, Zayn. Bang! Swish! Almost at the same time, a shout, a gunshot, and a sound of something breaking through the air sounded in everyone's ears. At the same time, a pitch-black bullet formed entirely from spiritual energy, streaked across the air, and reached the claw that was pinching Origami's throat at lightning speed. Before it came into contact with the claw, it turned into a transparent pitch-black light barrier that enveloped the claw and its owner. Xiaming seemed to realize that the pitch-black bullet wasn't an ordinary attack. But when he tried to retreat, the transparent pitch-black light barrier had already enveloped him. In an instant, everything enveloped by the transparent pitch-black light barrier, including the space around Xiaming, came to a standstill. No, it wasn't that everything came to a standstill, but that the flow of time in everything came to a complete halt. In a state of time standstill, even a powerful pseudo-demigod like Xiaming couldn't resist time itself. He was completely frozen in the transparent pitch-black light barrier formed by the bullet of 7. Not to mention moving, he couldn't even operate his consciousness. Zafkiel, bullet of 7. Kwang San's voice once again reverberated in the air, and the sound of gunfire once again rang out in this space. Immediately, the pitch-black bullet pierced through the air and directly hit Origami's body, causing Origami's dark blue eyes to flash with a bright light. The effect of Kurumi's bullet of 7 was to accelerate the flow of time. While the bullet of 7 was in effect, Origami's time would flow faster. In this case, be it her movement speed or attack speed, there would be a substantial increase. Without hesitation, Origami turned the heavy cannon in her hand and aimed it at Xieming, who was frozen in the torrent of time. Pause! The heavy cannon in her hand twisted abruptly. A laser blade protruded from the front end, vibrating repeatedly and letting out an ear-piercing buzzing sound. Chi! Under the effect of Aleph, Origami did not hesitate to swing the heavy cannon with a laser blade in her hand. In a flash of sharp swordlight, she heavily slashed the frozen body of Dark Scorpion. Splurt! Amidst the tearing sound, crimson blood spilled from midair, splattering onto the ruins of the Baruba Empire's royal city below. A small rain of blood fell to the ground, forming a small pool of blood. R1152. Chapter 1943. Heaven and earth seemed to have fallen silent at that moment. Kodori, Kurumi, Toka, Mikoto, Yoshino, and the other young ladies gazed at the scene in midair. Their expressions froze. Origami wielded the heavy cannon that had transformed into a laser lightsaber. Drops of blood trickled down the blade of the laser lightsaber, but she ignored them completely. Instead, she stared ahead with a grave expression. There, Xieming lowered his head, extended his arm, and grasped the vibrating laser lightsaber's blade. Ignoring the blood flowing from his hand, he lifted his head slowly, revealing a pair of calm, repressed eyes before the group of young ladies. However, what was even more depressing were the words that came out of Xieming's mouth in the next second. All of you are dead meat. When these words reached the ears of the group of young girls, their hearts fiercely trembled. Swish! At the next moment, a dark shadow launched a sneak attack and lashed at Origami's back. It was Xieming's barbed tail. Origami's pupils shrunk. The thruster engine on her back vibrated abruptly, propelling her backward. While retreating, she brandished the laser lightsaber in her hand and slashed at the dark shadow that lashed at her. Clang! The loud sound of steel colliding with steel echoed in the sky. The laser lightsaber in Origami's hand slashed at Xieming's tail. But it was a pity that Origami had used all her strength. The seemingly ferocious attack only caused a collision sound, causing the ferocious barbed tail to pause for a moment. Immediately after, the latter's momentum did not decrease but instead increased. Its speed abruptly increased by 2 to 3 levels. In a flash, it whipped toward Origami's chest. Even though Origami's reaction speed was one of the best among the group of young ladies, she couldn't dodge the attack that was 2 to 3 times faster. All she could do was to hold the laser lightsaber horizontally before her. Clang! Xieming's tail landed heavily on the laser lightsaber. A crisp sound of weapons clashing resounded. Oomph! A tremendous force burst forth from the laser lightsaber. Origami felt as though a heavy mountain had smashed into her. She let out a muffled groan. Her hand that held the lightsaber let out a subtle cracking sound, as though her bones were being crushed. Gotcha, then. The laser lightsaber in Origami's hand made a sound. Origami's heart skipped a beat. She hurriedly activated the thruster engine. She retreated to a distance away from Xieming and swept a glance at the laser lightsaber in her hand. On it, shockingly, there was already a crack in it. Origami couldn't help but be astonished. Although the weapon in Origami's hand was not an armament, it was the most advanced equipment developed by the Dem Company in the Date Battle world. Even the weapon of the world's strongest magician, Irene, was only at the same level as the one in Origami's hand. In terms of strength, it was definitely comparable to a gold armament. Now, the enemy's casual attack had caused a crack to appear on a gold armament. Although the crack wasn't very big, it was still quite shocking for an Origami. Swish! While Origami was still in shock, a sharp sound of something tearing through the air echoed. Along with a strong gust of wind, it rushed toward her. After that, Xieming's cold and ghastly face was imprinted into Origami's eyes. Die! Xieming uttered those words lightly, followed by a light punch. Under Origami's gaze, the punch landed on her chest. Territory, willful field, activate. At this critical juncture, Origami had no choice but to activate the Totori, willful field, with all her might, allowing the green crystal shield to envelop her body. Bang! But in the face of this light punch, the Totori, willful field, which should have been able to withstand a full blow from a ninth-stage powerhouse, shattered right away. Before Origami could react, the seemingly powerless fist that shattered the Totori, willful field, instantly landed on her body. Bang! In a muffled explosion, Origami felt as though she had been hit by a truck. Before she could even make a sound, she was blasted away like a bullet fired from a barrel. She crashed heavily to the ground, stirring up a cloud of thick dust. Origami, Miss Origami, Kurumi, Toka, Miko, Yoshino, and the other young ladies exclaimed in shock. Kotori raised her arm, and a black and red heavy cannon appeared in her hand. Scorching Destroyer, Camel, Cannon, Megiddo. The instant she yelled, scarlet flames coalesced in the Scorching Destroyer, Camel, Cannon, Megiddo. Along with extremely violent heat, it blasted out from the heavy cannon in Kotori's hand and struck Xiaming, who continued to pursue Origami. Boom! The flame beam was only half a meter away from Xiaming. Before it landed on him, it exploded like a sudden clap of thunder, erupting in a deafening explosion. A terrifying wave of flames swept out in midair. The scorching temperature distorted the surrounding air, and even the ground trembled violently, as though affected by it. However, Kotori didn't relax in the slightest. Even though this Scorching Destroyer, Camel, Cannon, Megiddo, could be said to be Kotori's strongest attack, it was impossible for her to kill Xiaming by herself, even if she used her strongest attack. Not only that, but Kotori also suspected that her attack couldn't even inflict any injuries on Xiaming. And as it turned out, Kotori's prediction wasn't wrong. Amidst the torrential wave of flames, a figure with a pair of wings on his back and a scorpion-like barb stepped out of the air slowly. Needless to say, it was Xiaming. Xiaming wasn't injured at all under the full force attack of the Scorching Destroyer Ghost, Camel, Cannon, Megiddo. However, his animal skin clothes had become tattered. There were scorch marks everywhere, and smoke was rising from them. He looked a little battered. It was apparent that even though the might of the Scorching Destroyer, Camel, Cannon, Megiddo, wasn't enough to injure Xiaming, it was still beyond his expectations and left him in a tough spot. It seems like I've underestimated you. Xiaming fixed his gaze on the group of young ladies, and a murderous glint flashed in his eyes. Even though I don't know what kind of beings you are exactly, you're able to use your mere strength of the ninth stage to put me in such a miserable state. Ladies, let me give you some praise for this. Despite his words, there wasn't a trace of praise on Xiaming's face. There was no anger in his eyes. Instead, they were filled with coldness. Waves of black mist-like gas rolled around his body as his aura grew stronger and stronger. It didn't take long for him to break through the ninth stage and reach the peak. It was only at this moment that Xiaming finally became serious. Kotori, Kumi, Toka, Mikoto, Yoshino, and the other young ladies' eyes flickered as they sensed the powerful aura from Xiaming's body. Their expressions flickered with uncertainty. So strong. Toka clutched the sandalphon tightly. Although her dreamy eyes wavered, she still looked at Xiaming with determination. He's really strong. Mikoto's voice was filled with apprehension. Can we really defeat that monster? Miss Origami, Miss Origami. A trace of worry appeared on Yoshino's face. Miss Origami, are you all right? Miss Origami. Kotori. Kurumi gripped a matchlock gun of different lengths in one hand. Only a grave expression remained on her usually crazed and seductive face. Think of something. We can't win in a head-on battle. Kotori's eyes seemed to be burning with flames. Her gaze flickered as she focused on her hand. On Kotori's hand, or to be precise, on her finger, was a simple and unadorned ring. It was one of the 3 rings Yukari gave to the group of young ladies before they left the capital of a different era for the Baruba Empire. There seemed to be something in the ring that could come in handy. Chapter 1944. from a ring Yukari gave her. Not only did Kotori find her prided airship Fraxinus, she also found many other handy items. These items are all very convenient items that Wu Yin exchanged from the system in the past. For example, there were cloaks that could conceal one's presence, medicines that could replenish one's energy, such as chi, mana, and spiritual energy, and special items that could guide the way in certain situations. Kotori could find all of them. Fraxinus, which was supposed to be Wu Yan's noble phantasm, is also in Kotori's space ring. Since it can be used without the owner's presence, it's clear that everything in the ring was left behind by Wu Yan. After all, unless the owner agrees, the owner's noble phantasm can't be used by others. Kotori can imagine Wu Yan, who is worried about the girls, racked his brains to find a way to increase the girls' chances of victory. He kept all the useful items he kept in his storage ring and told Yukari to hand them over to them. Last night, Kotori checked the items in the ring. She found some items that Wu Yan didn't think he would be able to use, but he left them behind just in case. Among these items, there are some that can be used now. Kotori flipped her hand, and a transparent crystal scroll appeared in her hand. This is... Kwang-san was slightly surprised as she opened her mouth. Return scroll? That's right. It's a return scroll that can teleport the user to a preset teleportation point. As long as he crushed the town return scroll in his hand, the town return scroll would teleport him to a predetermined teleportation point. The teleportation point in Kotori's hand was set at a special place Wu Yin once visited. Kotori's fiery eyes flickered when she thought of the teleportation point and a certain existence in that place. Soon she smiled. Nah. Kotori stared at Dark Scorpion hovering in the air in front of the girls and lowered her voice. I have an idea. As Kotori explained her thoughts, Toka, Meiju, and Yoshino were at a loss. However, Kurumi's eyes lit up and she smiled sweetly. I think it's feasible. I think so too. If we use it well, we can even kill this pseudo-demigod. Kotori clenched her teeth. But if we want to implement this plan, we have to find a way to get in touch with Dark Scorpion. Get in touch with Dark Scorpion. That's no simple task. Just now, before Dark Scorpion became serious, only Origami, with the support of a group of girls, seized the opportunity to attack Dark Scorpion and come into contact with him. Now that Dark Scorpion is serious, it won't be easy to capture him. Let me do it. Just as the group of young women tensed up, wary of Xie Ming and at a loss for what to do, a slightly weak voice rang out nearby. The group of girls immediately turned their heads to look. What they saw was a pale-faced Origami, slowly floating up from the ground, clutching her chest as she gasped for breath after removing the rubble covering her body. Origami, Lady Origami. Seeing that Origami seemed to be fine, the girls were pleasantly surprised. Oh, in midair, Xie Ming was also rather surprised. I didn't use my full strength in that attack, but it was enough to kill a Class 9 powerhouse. You're much stronger than an ordinary Class 9 human. Origami ignored Xie Ming's words of praise and mockery. Her blue eyes looked at Xie Ming without any ripples as she said this. I'm still too weak. Xie Ming wasn't the only one who was stunned. Even the group of young women was stunned by his words. Once upon a time, I thought that the only thing left in my life was hatred. In order to obtain enough power for revenge, I gave up everything. When I woke up, I realized that I had wasted my life on meaningless things. Origami seemed to be talking to herself as she spoke indifferently. Once upon a time, I also thought that I was saved. In order to repay the debt of gratitude, I once again gave my everything to that person. I no longer blindly pursued power. But now, I have once again awakened to the fact that if I don't have enough power, I don't even have the qualifications to give my life to that person. After saying that, Origami tossed away the expensive heavy cannon in her hand without any hesitation and cast her stern gaze towards Xie Ming. I will once again pursue power, but this time, it's not for revenge or to repay your debt. I don't want to defeat you. I want to give my life to that person. I want to use what belongs to me. As its voice subsided, Origami raised one of its hands, and on top of it was a small Tortori. However, The most important thing wasn't the terse suntory. It was the thing inside the terse suntory. It was a gem emitting a dazzling white light. Looking at the gem that was emitting a dazzling white light, Xian Ming spoke in surprise. "What's that?" Coterie and Meiju, who had obtained similar items before, widened their eyes in shock. Kurumi, Toka, Yoshino, and the others who vaguely sensed something exclaimed in surprise. "Spirit crystal." That's right. It was the spirit crystal that Origami obtained from Phantom. It should have belonged to Origami, but Wu Yin took it and returned it to her. It could grant humans the power of elves and turn the chosen ones into elves. Holding the spirit crystal that could change her existence at any time, Origami, who hated elves to the core, removed the terse suntory, covering it without hesitation, and let her hand touch the gem, emitting a dazzling white light. Buzz! In an instant, the dazzling brilliance released from the gem expanded sharply. Shortly after, it floated up and fused into Origami's chest. Gulp! A sound echoed from Origami's body. It was the sound of her heart pounding violently. As though a brand new heart was born in her body, her heartbeat became violent all of a sudden. The scorching hot blood that was completely different from the blood flowing in her body was transferred to her body. Origami, who had never experienced such an unusual sensation, couldn't help but turn pale and kneel on the ground. At the next moment, Origami let out a painful yet joyful cry. Then, a dazzling white light emanated from her body. "What's wrong?" Xiaming frowned as a hint of displeasure rose in his heart. "What happened?" Coterie and the other young ladies held their breaths and stared at the center of the dazzling light, waiting for their new companion to be born. They didn't have to wait for long before the intense white light suddenly dimmed, causing the space to darken. In the gray space, a beam of light shone silently. A strange young lady hovered in the beam of light and appeared before everyone's eyes. She was undoubtedly Origami. But what attracted everyone's attention was Origami's attire. It was a pure white gauze dress that extended upward along the curve of Origami's body. The dress only reached her knees. The design was rather unique, as though a blooming flower. A crown-like ring hovered above Origami's head. Silk that seemed to be organized by light hung down from the ring. Apart from the crown-like ring, the rest of the decorations were made of dazzling, pure white. At a glance, it looked like a unique wedding dress. One couldn't help but think that its owner was an angel who descended from the darkness. No, not like. At that moment, Origami had transformed into an angel and was born into this world as a new elf. R1152. Chapter 1945. Kite Origami, Level 84. The strength of a human after fusing with the spirit crystal and becoming an elf was dependent on the compatibility and nature of the spirit crystal before becoming an elf. Phantom, who gave the Origami spirit crystals, had also said that there was a limit to the use of the spirit crystal. The more the spirit crystal's nature and compatibility matched with the spirit crystal, the more powerful the spirit's power would be after it was turned into an elf. With Origami's original talent, if she fused with the spirit crystal, her strength wouldn't be any weaker than Toka's. But now, Origami had gone through the dim magic treatment and the transformation of the magical pond water. Her constitution had been greatly improved. Naturally, after fusing with the spirit crystal, her strength had become even more powerful. Level 84. Intermediate rank 9. This was Origami's current strength. She was even stronger than before. Xiaming, who was the first to sense the change in Origami's aura, frowned. Xiaming could sense a human aura from Origami just now. But now, he couldn't sense any human aura from Origami at all. His intuition told him that the change in this woman before him was on a level that even he couldn't touch, which made him very unhappy. "What did you do?" Origami still ignored him. Under everyone's gaze, she transformed into a streak of light and disappeared. When she reappeared, she was already in front of Kotori, Kurumi, Toka, Mikoto, Yoshino, and the other girls. She lifted her head and looked straight at Xiaming. I'll hold him back." Upon hearing that, the girls didn't have the time to express their thoughts about Origami's sudden spirit transformation. "Can you do it?" Kotori asked solemnly. "Even if you're in spirit form, it's too dangerous to face a pseudo-demigod." "No problem," Origami said calmly. "It's fine if it's for a short time." Kotori and Kurumi looked at each other and nodded. "Okay, get ready for battle." The group of girls nodded their heads. Origami immediately raised her hand. "Metatron." The sun fell from the sky in response to Origami's call. Then, in midair, a halo suddenly shot down and surrounded Origami. Then, the halos that descended from the sky turned into pieces that looked like wings. It had the appearance of a pair of wings, but it looked like a pair of golden, fossilized wings spinning around the Origami. With a spin, they formed a ring. It was as if a huge crown was placed on Origami's head. Army Destroyer Singer, March. On the side, Mikoto played a song that had the effect of increasing her strength. The spiritual energy that was just born in Origami's body but was skillfully controlled by her suddenly skyrocketed. The upgraded Origami immediately opened its hands. Along with the folding action, the front end of a huge crown-like Metatron on its head split into two parts, forming a circle like the sun. Metatron, Sun Mesh. The ring-shaped angel that unfolded above Origami's head began to spin. Every wing of the angel that seemed to have turned into golden fossils emanated a strong radiance as they spun. Boom! In an explosion, the Metatron that emanated a strong radiance scattered light in all directions. It was a light beam that bombarded the surroundings indiscriminately. Cheap tricks. Dark Scorpion, who wanted to figure out what kind of beings the girls were, glared coldly. He raised one of his arms, and a thick black mist emerged from it like a shield before him. In an instant, a large number of light beams that were released from the Metatron blasted in all directions. Boom, 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 boom. It was as if a golden rain had fallen. Beams of light containing astonishing power were flying through the sky. Not only did this indiscriminate attack land on the Baruba Empire's royal city, but it also struck the shield-like black mist in front of Dark Scorpion, killing many of the demonic beasts that were wreaking havoc there. Boom, 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 boom. When the light beams struck the black mist, they were like rainwater falling into a swamp. While the black mist rippled slightly, they failed to hurt Dark Scorpion, who was behind it. Maintaining the posture of holding the shield formed by the black mist with one hand, Dark Scorpion shifted his gaze to Origami, as though she were the only enemy in his eyes. He swung his other arm casually, and sharp black spears emerged on the shield formed by the black mist one after another. Like cannonballs erupting from the muzzle of a cannon, they rubbed against the chaotic atmosphere and pierced toward Origami in the blink of an eye. Metatron Malik. However, before the sharp black spears touched Origami, the pieces of Metatron that were spinning above Origami's head suddenly paused. Then, like a whirlwind, they spun in the opposite direction and gathered to form a pair of huge wings that hovered behind Origami. This way, together with Origami's spiritual equipment, she looked like an angel in a wedding dress. At the next moment, Origami transformed into a shadow that vanished on the spot and appeared in another direction, dodging all of Dark Scorpion's attacks. As if to seize this opportunity, the Origami General waved its hand that was raised above its head, and the wings that were spread out behind the Origami General spread out in all directions. Metatron Kadur. The scattered Metatrons seemed to possess their own consciousness as they transformed into streams of light that streaked across the sky in different trajectories, surrounding Dark Scorpion from all directions and pointing their sharp tips at him. Buzz! Along with the sound of space trembling, the front ends of the wing-shaped Metatrons gathered surges of spiritual power, transforming into enormous light beams that shot out one after another as though they were shooting from all directions. The uniform light beams emitted a dazzling brilliance that enfolded Dark Scorpion's entire vision like razor-sharp spears that pierced straight at him. The brilliance dazzled Dark Scorpion's vision and left him frustrated. Get lost. Xiaming's face immediately turned cold. He suddenly extended his hand, and black fog surged endlessly in his hand, turning into a huge beast claw. He reached forward and grabbed all the beams of light in the beast claw that blotted out the sky. Then he clenched his fist. Boom! All of the enormous light beams released by the Metatron exploded in a loud, muffled explosion under the grip of the enormous beast claw. Is that all? Then just surrender obediently. Dark Scorpion's expression was completely frosty. It was apparent that the fact that he hadn't been able to take down this group of beings who were like ants in his eyes for a long time had worn away his remaining patience. Don't worry. I won't kill you before I figure out who exactly you are. As soon as Dark Scorpion finished his sentence, he stomped his feet in the air and walked toward Origami, step by step. As he moved, an overwhelming black mist surged out of his body and coiled around him. The pressure emanating from his body made the spiritual energy in Origami's body flow somewhat sluggish. At that moment, Army Destroyer Singer, Rondo, in the sky, a violent sound wave descended abruptly like a storm descending from the heavens, smashing into Dark Scorpion's body. Boom! Caught off guard, Dark Scorpion was struck squarely by the violent sound wave. He plummeted from the impact and landed heavily on the ground, cracking it along his feet. Buzz! At the same time, a black shadow expanded on the ground where Dark Scorpion stood. One after another, pale hands emerged from the shadow and wrapped around Dark Scorpion. Got you. Chapter 1946. Got you. Along with this voice, the main bodies of the pale arms wrapped around Xiaming's body slowly emerged from the black shadow that expanded from the ground. They were young girls wearing black and red Gothic princess dresses. They had long and short ponytails and had red and gold eyes. Their gold eyes were in the shape of a clock, and their faces were filled with both joy and ferocity. These girls looked exactly the same. Even their expressions were exactly the same. Naturally, they were all Kurong 3. To be exact, they were clones of Curtains who used the Bullet of 8 to recreate themselves in the past timeline. Looking at the young ladies who looked both delighted and malevolent as they wrapped their arms around his body and bound him firmly, Xiaming couldn't help but be taken aback. He came to a halt for an instant. Ice puppet, Sadkiel. The instant Xiaming came to a halt, a white beam of light containing a terrifyingly low temperature descended from the sky like a comet descending from the sky, leaving a trail of ice shards in its wake. In a loud thud, it landed where Xiaming was. Kacha, kacha! All of a sudden, the space within a 10-meter radius around Dark Scorpion, including the ground and the Kwongs who were grabbing him tightly, began to crack with hair-raising sounds. They were gradually covered in hard ice and shortly after turned into an enormous iceberg. The bone-chilling cold assaulted Xiaming's body from all directions, causing his pupils to tremble. Rolling black mist surged out of his body like heat waves, rampaging inside the iceberg. Rumble! Judging from how fast it was cracking, in less than 10 seconds, the 10-meter-tall iceberg would collapse under Dark Scorpion's violent struggle. However, these 10 seconds were enough for the group of young ladies to do a lot of things. Zafkiel, Bullet of 7, Zayn, accompanied by the sound of a gunshot, a pitch-black bullet that could stop the flow of time, streaked across space. In the sharp sound of breaking the air, it landed on the trembling ground, on the iceberg that was cracking continuously. With the point of impact as the center, a transparent pitch-black light barrier suddenly fluctuated, enveloping the entire iceberg that was cracking. For a moment, regardless of whether it was the iceberg that was cracking, the black fog that was surging, or the struggling Dark Scorpion, all of them stopped moving under the cover of the transparent pitch-black light. Dark Scorpion didn't have any means to deal with Kwong San's time ability. For Dark Scorpion, what he needed to be wary of was Kwong San's ability, not to mention that he had suffered a loss because of it before. Therefore, no matter how powerful Violent 3's ability was, it would take time to fire a bullet, and even more time to hit Dark Scorpion. This time was enough for a dark scorpion to dodge Kwang San's bullet when he was on guard. However, being frozen by the low temperature of the tranquil and caught by Kwang San's doppelganger, even Dark Scorpion couldn't dodge in time. He could only be frozen in the torrent of time by the bullet of 7. Now, Kwang San hurriedly shouted, "Miss Meijio!" Got it. Meijio's fingers seemed to turn into phantoms in the space in front of her, sliding across the light keyboard, unfolding in front of her. Army Destroyer Singer, march! With Army Destroyer Singer as the center, the materialized sound wave reverberated in the surroundings, contracted, and surged forward. In the next moment, the sound wave rippled through the bodies of Tohiro and Origami as if it was absorbed and drilled into their bodies. In an instant, Tohiro and Origami's aura expanded wildly. The spiritual powers in their bodies turned into steam-like airflows that rolled violently. Upon sensing the surge of spiritual powers in her body, Tohiro puffed out her chest, lifted her foot, and knocked the ground heavily with her heel. Bam! The ground behind Tohiro trembled violently, exploded, and bulged upward. Then, a huge golden throne that was far taller than Tohiro emerged. Bam! There was another explosion, but this time it wasn't the ground that exploded. Instead, it was the huge throne that stood behind 10 incense that exploded into countless small pieces. Like paper scraps that were swept up in a storm, they circled around and gathered on the huge sword in 10 incense's hand. When all the fragments of the throne gathered on Tohiro's sandal fawn, a huge, ferocious-looking sword that was more than 10 meters long appeared in her hand. At the same time, Origami waved her hand, and the Metatron that hovered around her also gathered in a whistling sound. It hovered above Origami's head and transformed back into its original shape of a crown. Shortly after, Origami spread out her hand, and the Metatron that had transformed into a crown spun in its entirety, heading toward Dark Scorpion. It looked like a huge cannon muzzle. Immediately after, pitch-black light particles condensed on the greatsword in 10 Fragrance's hand, turning into a black stream of air that began to wander along the greatsword's body. The crown on Origami's head also bloomed with light. Strands of light gathered inside the crown, making the light more and more resplendent. Sandalfawn, the last sword, Halvan Helif. Metatron, cannon crown, half Helov. The shouts of the two elf young ladies overlapped, reverberating between heaven and earth. Pitch black and pure white light flickered in this world. Clang! In a crisp sword hum, Tohiro slashed down with her final sword, half Helov, dragging a huge spiritual energy sword wave. Like a crescent moon flashing across space, the sword wave tore through the ground and space and swept forward. Boom! At the same time, the Metatron above Origami's head flashed with a strong light. The light that gathered transformed into a terrifying light stream that shot out in an unstoppable burst. The sound of space being compressed resounded as it blasted forward along with the huge sword wave. Under the illumination of the pitch-black and pure white light, the pitch-black sword wave and pure white light beam landed ruthlessly on the iceberg that was frozen in the torrent of time. Boom! An earth-shattering explosion reverberated throughout the desert of the Baruba Empire. Violent shockwaves swept out in all directions like a whirlwind, stirring up clouds of sand and dust that filled the sky. Under Jaffar's command, the Baruba soldiers who were retreating in an orderly manner screamed in agony when they were hit by the sudden shockwave. They fell to the ground in all directions, and their bodies, which were already in bad shape, worsened even further. The magical beasts wreaking havoc in the Baruba Empire's royal city were in an even more miserable state. Some of them were directly smashed to pieces by the shockwaves, while others were swept out of the city and blown away in all directions, disappearing without a trace. This time, the already dilapidated royal city was completely crushed in the long river of history. One could vaguely see that the majestic royal city in the middle of the two majestic mountain ranges was no more. All that was left was a huge pit standing in the middle of the mountain range. Vast *RD. Amidst the sand and dust that filled the sky in the pit, Ming, whose body was emitting light smoke and covered in tiny wounds from head to toe, retreated with a furious expression and flew into the sky. Looking at the countless tiny wounds on his body, his eyes glinted in a vicious glint. It was apparent that Ming didn't expect himself to be injured. To be injured by a bunch of ants. I will make sure you die a graveless death, Ming bellowed. But he didn't notice that a figure had been waiting for him on the path he retreated. The figure extended a hand and placed it on Ming's shoulder. I've caught you this time. Chapter 1947. The hand that suddenly appeared on Ming's shoulder caused his withdrawing body to violently pause. His pupils shrunk as he turned his head with all his might and looked behind him. The first thing that entered Ming's eyes was a smear of scarlet. It was the color of the blazing flames, and also the color of the pupils of the spirit who controlled the flames. Like a fairy who had fallen into the mortal world, Coterie appeared behind Ming unknowingly with a feather coat hanging over her slender shoulders. She wore a white kimono with burning sleeves and stepped on flames beneath her feet. Her delicate, pretty face with a malicious smile was revealed to Ming. No, to be more precise, Coterie didn't appear behind Dark Scorpion without anyone noticing. Instead, the Misaka sisters who were on standby in Fraxinus had calculated Dark Scorpion's escape route with their outstanding computational ability and the precision instruments in the command room. She was waiting for Dark Scorpion to walk right into her trap. Earlier, Kurumi, Toka, Origami, Meijio, and Shiba launched their all-out attack to attract Ming's attention. Not only did they make him overlook Coterie's presence, but they also lured him to Coterie's escape route. Before Dark Scorpion could react, Coterie placed one hand on Dark Scorpion's shoulder and held a translucent return scroll in her other hand. Before Dark Scorpion could react, she tightened her grip on the return scroll. Boom! At the next moment, the crystal-like scroll shattered, and a blinding radiance erupted. It shrouded Coterie and Ming, turning them into tiny particles of light that dissipated on the spot. Dark Scorpion's vision suddenly blurred, and the scene before him distorted. By the time he recovered, the scene before him had changed drastically. The endless desert of the Baruba Empire was gone, only to be replaced by a vast ocean. That's right, an ocean. Ming was currently in the air above an island. There was a city on the island. It was a rather ancient city. The buildings in this city were not as Western as the ones in the Ailu Empire, nor were they as Western as the ones in the Baruba Empire, because they were built in the desert. There was a strong aura of a prostitute, and there was a hint of vicissitudes in it. In the city, all the buildings were made of red and white marble, giving people a sense of holiness. Some of the larger buildings still had the appearance of castle. It was like a gathering place of the ancient Western European aristocrats. The ground was paved with red bricks, and trees with green leaves were planted on both sides of the street. There were also flower beds around the roots of the trees. It was very beautiful. Of course, while the city was beautiful, a beast king like Dark Scorpion wouldn't be able to understand its beauty. Perhaps he would even destroy it mercilessly because it was an eyesore. However, Ming's heart was completely shaken. He couldn't extricate himself and didn't have the mood to care about the city at all. It was because there was a tree in the center of the city, or rather, in the center of the island. It was a giant tree that could barely be described as a sky-high tree. The canopy of the giant tree was at least 10 kilometers in diameter, completely covering half of the city on the island. The leaves were extremely dense, making it difficult for sunlight to pass through them. The vast canopy of the tree was enough to cover the sky and cover the sun, but that wasn't the most important thing. Most importantly, there was an extremely ancient and ethereal aura emanating from the giant tree. It made Ming, who had reached the pseudo-demigod level, feel a strong sense of danger. His intuition told him that if he didn't leave the island now, there would only be one outcome for him: death. he'd be killed by the giant tree in front of him. This intuition made Dark Scorpion's first thought to be absurd. It was just a tree. How could it kill him? Could it be that the tree would move and attack him? Because of this thought, Xiaming lost his last chance to escape. If the members of the royal families of the three empires were here, they would definitely recognize this island. This island was the Emperor Island. The giant tree standing in the middle of Emperor Island was naturally the guardian tree. It was a level 98 guardian tree that was infused with the divine powers of the three deities and possessed earth-shattering power. As the true guardian of the land of gods, the guardian tree's duty was to expel anyone other than the three empires' royalty who wanted to enter Emperor Island. It also prevented outsiders from entering the land of gods, guarded the land of gods, and stopped the guardians from leaving Emperor Island. And now, Xiaming appeared above Emperor Island silently. To the guardian tree, which had gained sentience but didn't have high spiritual intelligence, what was this? Invasion. Therefore, the guardian tree, which only moved when the spatial channel to the land of gods was opened every 10 years, finally let out a bellow like a king whose territory was invaded, while Xiaming was still in shock. Buzz! Almost in the blink of an eye, the guardian tree emanated a rich green radiance all over. Its tree crown that blotted out the sky trembled abruptly, releasing an ancient, majestic aura that pressed down on the entire Emperor Island like a heavy mountain, causing the entire island to tremble. Upon sensing the terrifying aura, Xiaming finally believed his premonition, and his expression changed drastically. But it was a pity that it was too late for regrets. Buzz! The guardian tree's tree crown trembled again. The rich green radiance hovering above it coalesced into a beam of light that shot out and swept towards Xiaming. The beam of light did not pose any threat. It did not even cause the slightest sound. It was like a beam of light that had shot out from a lighthouse, silently passing through space and shooting in Xiaming's direction. However, it was precisely this soundless and harmless ray of light that caused Xiaming's hairs to stand on end. His face was filled with shock as he frantically retreated backwards. However, as Xiaming retreated, a scorching beam of fire suddenly shot over from behind him. The scorching heat caused the atmosphere to become chaotic. It shot through space and landed heavily on Xiaming's back, where he had to pass through. Boom! Flames and waves of fire rose in midair above the Emperor Island, dyeing a corner of the sky scarlet. Xiaming, who was focused on dodging the guardian tree's attack, was caught off guard and took the blow. His entire back was scorched black. He let out a blood-curdling shriek, and in the explosion of flames and waves of fire, his retreating figure was pushed forward instead. In an instant, the beam of light that flew over silently met Xiaming head-on, enveloping him and stopping him in his tracks as though he were frozen in space. Swish! Along with a sharp whistle, an afterimage flitted across the sky like a whip, lashing out at the frozen Xiaming. It was a tree root. It was a root that extended from the guardian tree. The ordinary-looking tree root was accompanied by a sharp whistling sound. It was accompanied by a violent force and ferocious force as it viciously whipped Xiaming from top to bottom. No, Xiaming could only let out a desperate roar before the tree root, which had turned into an afterimage, landed on his body. Boom! With a muffled sound, Xiaming, who was frozen in the air, was struck by the huge root. His entire body exploded into a large blob of blood, creating a rain of blood that fell towards the royal capital below. This pseudo-demigod beast king, who had the fate of the entire Bruba Empire in his hands and had planned to kill everyone in the Bruba Empire, was reduced to ashes in less than 10 seconds under the attack of the level 98 Guardian Divine Tree. Not even a corpse was left behind. Looking at this scene, Coterie, who was equipped with a black and red heavy cannon wrapped in flames, heaved a sigh of relief. But her body tensed up, and she flipped her hand, retrieved a teleportation scroll, and crushed it without hesitation. Boom! In the sound of the scroll shattering, Coterie turned into light particles and disappeared on the spot. Swish! A thick, sturdy tree root that was as sharp as a spear penetrated the spot where Coterie was standing. Shortly after, she realized that the enemy was no longer there and slowly shrunk back to the guardian tree. It was only at that moment that the guardians on the Emperor Island were alerted. The entire Emperor Island was in an uproar, announcing the end of this sudden invasion. Chapter 1948, Baruba Empire, Royal City. When Coterie teleported herself and Dark Scorpion back to the Emperor Island with a recall scroll, the shockwaves from Mika's Gabgel, March, Toka's Sandalphon, Final Sword, and Origami's Metatron, Artilith finally died down. After enduring the shockwaves from Mijiu's and Origami's strongest attacks, the city guards were retreating fell to the ground once again. Their bodies were piled with all sorts of rubble and stones as they wailed in agony. Roar, Aoo! The magical beast army led by Xieming didn't fare well either. In fact, they ended up in an even more tragic state than the city guards of the Baruba Empire. Many of them were covered in blood, and they let out weak cries as they struggled on the ground. But they couldn't get up. The sky that was originally filled with locust-like flying magical beasts had once again become empty. Obviously, under the attack of the aftershock, these flying magical beasts had been blown to an unknown corner of the desert. Sand and dust filled every corner of the scene, causing everyone's vision to become blurry. As a result, the ground of the Baruba Empire caved in, forming a huge crater. It was an extremely tragic sight. Only the elven girls, Gita, Kun, Will, Jebi, and the 7 Class 9 magical beasts were not affected by the shockwaves. Or rather, the impact was minimal. They did not fall to the ground like the other city guards and magical beasts. Instead, they barely managed to stand where they were. Gita, Kun, Will, and Jebi looked at the ruins of the Baruba Empire's royal city. While they were shocked by Toka and Origami's attack, they couldn't help but feel sad. Ever since Baruba, one of the 4 great gods, established the Baruba Empire, the capital city of the Baruba Empire had never been damaged. However, every time it was damaged, it was almost harmless. Let alone shaking the foundation of the city, it didn't even bring about minor ailments. It was a smooth sailing for the city. That was to be expected. The Baruba Empire was one of the 3 great powers that divided the Spalier world. No one dared to touch it. The Baruba Empire's royal city was also protected by a demigod guardian, who could harm the Baruba Empire's royal city. But this time, the Baruba Empire's royal city finally couldn't survive the ordeal and was crushed in the long river of history. The pitiful Baruba Empire's royal city was known as the sturdiest fortress in the Spalier world due to its terrain, structure, and other factors. But in this war between humans and magical beasts, it became the first royal city to be breached. One couldn't help but lament a karma. Yet, the Baruba Empire's upper echelons couldn't harbor any resentment against the people who caused this, which was the most tragic thing. After all, the other party was also indirectly saving the Baruba Empire, wasn't it? There is no doubt that the Baruba Empire was much more important than the royal city. Roar! 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 The 7 Class 9 magical beasts that Dark Scorpion brought along each occupied a corner. With their own roars, they gradually retreated and distanced themselves from the battlefield. Of course, the Class 9 magical beasts weren't afraid of Gutta, Kun, Will, and Jebi. Instead, they were fearful of the young elven girls who released such a terrifying attack. Ha! 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 In the center of the royal city ruins, Kurumi, Toka, Origami, Mijio, Yoshino, and the other young elven girls couldn't stop panting. Toka and Origami half-knelt on the ground with intense fatigue in their eyes. Mijio slumped to the ground listlessly. Kurumi and Yoshino's angels were also nowhere to be seen. They were more or less exhausted. After a series of coordinated attacks, it was no surprise that the group of elven girls had exhausted too much of their spiritual energy. In particular, Ten Incense, Origami, and Meijio, who had released their most powerful attacks, as well as Meijio, who had been buffing the girls, had exhaustion in their eyes and faces that could not be concealed. It was imaginable how hard the young elves had fought. If the 7 class 9 magical beasts pounced on them at that moment, the young elven girls would definitely be in grave danger. But it was a pity that magical beasts were magical beasts, after all, before they became demigod beast kings. Even class 9 magical beasts weren't as intelligent as human children. Their instincts often took precedence over their actions. Under the deterrence of the terrifying attack, the class 9 magical beasts were instinctively fearful of the young elven girls. Therefore, not only did they not take advantage of the situation, but they also distanced themselves from the young elven girls. Buzz! Not long after, a resplendent light flashed in the air. Coterie emerged from the light and fell to the ground. However, she immediately knelt down on one knee. Her face was filled with lingering fear as she panted slightly. Coterie, Ms. Coterie. The elven girls immediately stood up and came to Coterie's side. Miss Coterie. Yoshino supported Coterie and asked worriedly, "Are you all right?" "I'm fine." Coterie shook her head, broke free from Yoshino's support, and let out a long sigh. "Although I heard from Big Brother that the guardian tree of the Emperor Island is powerful and even stronger than Yukari, I didn't expect it to be this powerful." The reason why Coterie dared to boast that she could kill Dark Scorpion with a teleportation scroll was because she found the teleportation point of the teleportation scroll that Wu Yin left behind on the Emperor Island. She recalled what Wu Yin said about the guardian tree when he returned from the Emperor Island and came up with the idea to make use of it. The guardian tree's duty was to protect the land of gods and prevent outsiders from entering the Emperor Island. It also prevented the guardian family members from leaving the Emperor Island without permission. Apart from the royal families of the 3 empires, any outsiders who invaded the Emperor Island would be struck by the guardian tree. On the other hand, Dark Scorpion wasn't a member of the 3 empires' royal families. His sudden appearance on Emperor Island would definitely trigger the guardian tree. With the guardian tree's level 98 strength, it would be a piece of cake for it to deal with a pseudo-demigod who hadn't even reached level 90. The guardian tree was indeed powerful. The pseudo-demigod Beast King, who was able to handle the young elven girl's attacks with ease, died in less than 3 moves. Although Coterie's interference was partly due to the fact that Coterie had obstructed Dark Scorpion, it was still enough to show how powerful the guardian tree was. The word invincible wasn't just for show. Fortunately, Coterie didn't let her guard down and used a teleportation scroll to leave as soon as she saw Dark Scorpion being dealt with. Otherwise, Coterie, who wasn't a member of the 3 empires' royal families, would have suffered the same fate as Dark Scorpion. At the very least, Coterie didn't think her undying phoenix's regenerative ability could save her from the guardian tree's attacks. "Where's the Beast King?" Kwangsun looked around. Did the plan work? Yes. Coterie took a deep breath and stood up. She told the elven girls, "It worked. Dark Scorpion is dead." Hearing this, all the elven girls, including the kind-hearted 4, heaved a sigh of relief and smiled joyfully. Even a faint smile appeared on Origami's face, making her look exceptionally beautiful. Coterie also smiled at the sight of the smiles on the elven girls' faces. She looked up at the sun hanging high in the sky and murmured to herself, "Let's go. Do you see it?" Yes. The war between us. Behemoth Forest, capital of alternate generations. On the top floor of the Heart of Generations, Yukari watched the scene of Xieming being killed by the guardian tree and Coterie escaping from the Emperor Island. A smile appeared on her face as she raised her hand and made a slight stroke, opening up another rift. Then, a strange black light shot out from the crack. It was like a small animal that ran into a graveyard in a panic. Before it could react, Yukari grabbed it and covered it with a barrier. The second one, R1152. Chapter 1949. On the other side, while Shokuha Misaki's group headed towards the Ailu Empire and Koteri's group headed towards the Baruba Empire dealt with the Beast Kings, Hinajuku, Mikoto, Ikaros Yakiya, and Yushin's group headed toward the Feiya Empire ran into a huge problem. If the Spalier world were to be shown on a map, with the Behemoth Forest as the center, the Ailu Empire was to the southwest, the Baruba Empire was to the north, and the Fea Empire was to the southeast. The three empires surrounded the Behemoth Forest in a triangle formation. Due to the warmer climate in the southeast, the rainfall was higher than the other two empires. Because of this, the Fea Empire's environment wasn't as bad as the Baruba Empire. In fact, it was even better than the Ailu Empire. One day after the girls split up from the supply town and headed to their respective empires, Kotori and the other elven girls finished off Dark Scorpion, who attacked the Baruba Empire. Hinajiku, Mikoto, Ikaros, Yakuya, and Yushin, who entered the Fea Empire, had yet to arrive at the Fea Empire's capital. The reason was simple. It was because he could no longer fly. That's right, they couldn't fly anymore. Ever since they entered the Fea Empire, Chuju, Mikoto, Ikaros, Yakuya, and Yushin realized that they couldn't fly. Every time they tried to fly, a heavy pressure would press down on them from above. Everyone who was 5 meters above the ground would be pushed back down to 5 meters below the ground. That is to say, once Hinajiku, Mikoto, Ikaros, Yakuya, Yakaina, and the other girls are 5 meters above the ground, their bodies will be pulled back to 5 meters above the ground due to an unknown pressure, unable to fly any further. That was why Hinajiku, Mikoto, Ikaros, Yakuya, Yushin, and the rest of the girls who lost their ability to fly were still wandering around the borders of Fea Empire. They couldn't reach the Fea Empire's capital even after a long time. At this moment, Hinajiku, Mikoto, Ikaros, Yakuya, Yuhin, and the other girls were leading 5,000 Misaka sisters in one of the forests of Fea Empire. With great difficulty, he led the large group in an attempt to pass through this large forest. Chuju, who was leading the group, suddenly stopped and looked up at the sky. Under the dark sky, a crescent moon was hanging in the sky all by itself. The cold moonlight shone down from the sky. The light illuminated the path in the forest so that the girls wouldn't be blinded. They couldn't see anything. Only now did Hinajiku realize that night had fallen. Wiping the sweat from her face, she turned to look at Mikoto, who was walking beside her. Mikoto, it's getting late. Let the sisters rest. Mikoto lifted her head and looked at the sky. She didn't want to stop and rest, but she thought about her sisters' bodies. Even though they were healed to the level of a normal person, they were only at the level of a normal person. Even if they had the help of this CR unit, their stamina should be pretty much exhausted right now. With that in mind, Mikoto nodded in agreement. Then let's rest. Under Hinajiku and Kotori's orders, the Misaka sisters spread out and skillfully took out their tents. Some of the Misaka sisters were responsible for setting them up, while the others went to gather some firewood and started a bonfire. Wisps of smoke rose from a corner of the forest as if they were camping. The faint bonfire danced lightly, bringing a trace of warmth and light to this silent and cold night. Beside the largest fire, Chuju, Mikoto, Ikaros, Yakuya, Yushin, and the other girls sat around the fire, facing Wu Yen. Yi Juya was fiddling with the flames of the bonfire with the branch in his hand. His mercury-like eyes were filled with displeasure. Seeing Yi Juya like this, Shi Xian's eyes narrowed as if she knew what Yi Juya was dissatisfied with. She tilted her head. Question, is Yakuya still angry? Isn't that obvious? She casually tossed the branch into the bonfire. Her delicate and cute face shone brightly under the illumination of the bonfire. She rested her chin on her palm and had an indignant look on her face. We are the hurricane witches, the fairies of the Bachiyu family. We were rejected by the sky. This is a great humiliation. As fairies with the ability to control the wind, the sky has always been Yakuya's and Yushin's domain. In the world of date battle, the two elven girls relied on their swift and violent movement range and speed to leave the troublesome misty and dim in the dust every time they appeared, living a carefree life. Now, once Yi Juya and Shi Xian were 5 meters above the ground, they could no longer fly any higher. It was as if there was an invisible ceiling there. No matter how hard they tried, they could not fly up. How could Yi Juya, who had always regarded the sky as his domain, be happy. In fact, Xian was also unhappy in his heart, but he didn't vent it out. Naturally, he could understand Yi Ju Shi's dissatisfaction. Not being able to fly has brought us a lot of trouble. Makoto sighed. If we continue like this, when will we reach the Fea Empire's capital? If we keep going like this, we won't be able to reach Fea Empire's capital even after a few years. Chuju said helplessly. That's why we have to find a city and see if we can take an airship to Fea Empire's capital. Otherwise, we'll be in big trouble. Makoto nodded. She bit her nails and said in annoyance, Seriously, why can't we fly anymore? Didn't I give you a holy order? Yakuya crossed his arms and snorted. It's the sky that's rejecting us. Hinajiku and Makoto looked at each other. Then Hinajiku said with a hint of resentment in her voice, I say, Yakuya, can't you make it easier for us to understand? It means that Yakuya is saying that the authority to control the sky has been taken away by someone. Yushin said with an expressionless and listless face. Someone is controlling the wind in the sky. Someone is controlling the wind in the sky. Both Hinajiku and Makoto hesitated for a moment. Then Makoto said with uncertainty, You're saying that someone is controlling the wind in the sky so that we can't fly? I agreed. Xian nodded gently. She raised her hand, and a small tornado appeared on it. Yakuya and Yushin can feel that the wind in the sky has been taken away by someone else. That's why we can't fly. Other than Yakuya, Chuju and Makoto didn't know what she was talking about, but they could guess the gist of it. In other words, someone was interfering with the act of flying, turning the sky 5 meters above the ground into a complete forbidden zone. That was why everyone was unable to fly up into the sky. That's where the question comes. Who is interfering with other people's flight? Why are they interfering with other people's flight? What's the point of doing this? Since he dares to invade the territory of us, the 8 dancing spirits, he should be prepared to suffer the punishment of the heavenly spear. Yeju clenched his fists and yelled in an excited manner. It just so happens that my divine power has evolved under the cleansing of the sacred water. Let me, the spirit of Bachiyaji, show you how foolish it is to trespass on my territory. Translate, Xian said calmly. Due to the transformation of the magical water, Yakuya is eager to find someone to fight. That's why he's very excited. Yushin. Yakuya glared at Yushin in annoyance. He didn't care about his Chinibu speech anymore. Why did you expose my thoughts? Refute. Even if Yushin didn't expose Yakuya's thoughts, everyone would understand just by looking at how excited he is. I'm not excited. Hinajiku and Makoto could only smile bitterly as they watched the Baba sisters bicker with each other. But at the same time, they had a better understanding of the relationship between the two sisters. Boom! At this moment, a loud sound reverberated. Chapter 1950. Boom! In the middle of the night, in the middle of the quiet forest, the thunderous explosion was abrupt and loud. All of the Misaka sisters who were resting immediately stood up. Some of them grabbed their lightsabers while others raised their heavy cannons. They were all on high alert as they looked at the end of the forest path in front of them. Chuju, Makoto, Ikaros, Yukian, and the other girls also stood up and looked towards the front. What's that sound? Yukian asked hesitantly. It's an explosion? No. Makoto's forehead flashed with a flash of lightning, and her brows furrowed. That sounds like something hitting something. Is that so? Chuju squinted her eyes, trying to see through the lack of light. She gave up and turned to Ikaros, who hadn't said a word. Right now, Ikaros had one hand pressed against her ear. Illusory square frames appeared in her pair of indigo pupils. The color of her eyes was constantly changing like a radar, constantly fluctuating. Wide-range radar activated. Detected signs of life. Number 5. Initial assessment. Humans. Chuju, Makoto, Yukian, and Yukian's eyes lit up with excitement. Because the 3 empires had gathered all the combat forces in their respective cities in the capital city, the combat forces that could not be used, and the ordinary civilians were evacuated overseas to take refuge. That's why the girls didn't see a single human on their way here. The only ones they saw were rank 1, 2, and 3 demonic beasts. Now that they're finally able to see a human, not only can they ask for the location of the next city, they might even find out why they can't fly. When that happens, the girls' predicament will be much better. While the girls were overjoyed, at the end of the forest path, 2 figures staggered as they appeared in a sorry state. It was imprinted in the eyes of the group of girls. What surprised the group of girls was that not far behind the 2 figures who were running in a sorry state, 3 other black figures flashed out. Their bodies actually carried a wave of undisguised killing intent. It came from afar. The girls sensed it. Question. Yukian tilted her head. What's going on? What's going on? Isn't it obvious? The only possibility is that the 3 people behind are chasing after the 2 in front. But why would humans kill each other? Isn't this the moment when the demonic beast army is attacking? The group of girls who didn't know that the same thing was happening in the Baruba Empire could only look at each other in confusion. As the 2 silhouettes in front of them ran towards them, the girls finally got a clear view of the 2 silhouettes. It was a male and female duo. The male was about 30 years old. He was a rather handsome middle-aged man. The female was a young girl who looked about 17 or 18 years old. The man's footsteps were staggering, and there were some bloodstains on his body. It was obvious that he was injured. The young girl, on the other hand, looked a little better. However, at this moment, her delicate and moving little face was filled with panic. As for the people chasing after the man and woman, there were 3 people dressed in black. They were dressed like assassins, and even their faces were covered. Perhaps due to his injuries, the male's legs gave way, and he almost fell. The young girl hurriedly helped him up. With this delay, the distance between the 3 black-clothed men behind him narrowed by quite a bit. He could even hear the laughter of the other party. The weak man tilted his head and glanced at the approaching black-clothed men. He gritted his teeth as despair filled his heart. Coincidentally, he saw a group of young ladies and many Misaka's sisters in front of him. He was stunned for a moment before he was overjoyed. It was as if he had grasped onto the last straw as he shouted out loud, "Young miss in front, please help us." Upon hearing the man shout, the girl seemed to have noticed the group of girls and Misaka's sisters in front of her. Her face lit up with joy. However, as soon as the man shouted, the 3 men in black dashed over and surrounded the man and the girl. "Hee, you still want to run?" One of the black-clothed men looked down at the 2 men who were in a sorry state and laughed strangely. The male and the young girl ignored the assassin. Instead, they looked at the group of girls with pleading eyes. Seeing this, Hinajiku and Mikoto both frowned. "How is it?" Yakuya asked directly. "Save them. Save them." This was also the reason why Hinajiku and Mikoto were frowning. No matter if it's Hinajiku or Mikoto, they're both very kind-hearted girls. If it's any other world, even if the other party didn't ask them for help, they'd jump out to help on their own accord. Unfortunately, this is the Spalier world. The Spalier world worships the strong. The unspoken rule is that the weak are prey to the strong. There are fights happening almost every day. Vendettas, killings for love, and even killings due to different interests are happening all the time. It's hard to determine who's right and who's wrong. Hinajiku and Mikoto are kind-hearted people, but they still remember what Wu Yin told them when they first came to Silveria. They mustn't be too merciful. Otherwise, if they wrongly help the bad guys or get used by the bad guys and end up doing bad things with good intentions, that would be a huge sin. That's why they're hesitating. As for the Bawa sisters, they don't mind. They're elves. They don't have any bad feelings towards humans, but they don't have any good feelings towards them either. Otherwise, they wouldn't have fought without hesitation every time they appeared and caused chaos in the world. That's why if Chuju and Mikoto decide to help, the Bawu sisters will do it without hesitation. If they don't, they'll just watch from the sidelines. It's because of this that even though one is arrogant and the other is lazy, they're very obedient. Wu Yan likes them a lot. Ikaros, who didn't care about anything other than Wu Yan's words, was even more indifferent. She stood quietly on the side and didn't say anything. Of course, the silence of the group of girls also caused the expressions of the two parties, one fleeing and one chasing, to darken at the same time. "Little girl," one of the black-clothed men warned her. "Mind your own business." Originally, these black-clothed men didn't need to care about a few young girls. If they interfered, they'd just kill them. However, the 5,000 Misaka sisters were standing behind the group of girls. They had the advantage in numbers. Even if it was a group of little girls, the three men in black could not help but be wary. They could only issue a warning. "Ladies, we're the followers of Prince Kaya of Faya Empire's royal family. Please help us." The girl shouted. "After this, Prince Kaya will definitely repay your kindness on our behalf." As soon as she said that, Hinajiku and Mikoto both looked up in surprise at the girl. "You're Prince Kaya's followers?" Hearing them call out their master's name, the man and girl didn't get angry. Instead, they were overjoyed. The three black-clothed men's eyes darkened. Could it be that they're acquaintances of Prince Kaya? Thinking of this, before the man and the young girl could react, one of the three black-clothed men coldly shouted, "Brother Yi, let's go. Kill. Don't let anyone know." Hearing the order of this black-clothed person, the other two black-clothed people immediately responded in a deep voice. The three of them held the weapons in their hands tightly at the same time. Their bodies moved and directly rushed toward the man and the young lady. Majestic do-chi surged out, causing the air in this part of the forest to slightly solidify. Looking at the level of their do-chi, these three black-clothed men are rank 7 fighters. Peak rank 7 fighters. Seeing the three peak rank 7 black-clothed men rushing over from the surroundings, the man's expression abruptly changed. He pulled the young lady's hand and was about to stand up and charge towards the group of young ladies with all his might. However, 3 cold, glinting weapons had already appeared around the two of them and pierced towards them like poisonous snakes. The man and woman, who had no power to fight back, could only watch as the 3 deadly weapons stabbed towards them. Their hearts were filled with shock and despair. Beep, beep, beep. Just as the two of them were about to close their eyes and wait for death, the sound of electricity clashing rang out. Chapter 1951. Beep, beep, beep. When the sound of electricity clashing reverberated in the forest, an extremely dazzling bluish-white light covered everyone's vision, causing them to lose their vision. 3W, the man and the girl, who were waiting for death with their eyes closed, suddenly felt a sense of weightlessness, as if they were being hung up by something. Then they heard a whistling sound, and their bodies lost their balance. The entire process only lasted for a short moment before the bluish-white light that blocked everyone's vision completely dissipated. When the man and the girl regained their vision, they were shocked to find that they had left their original position and were standing in the middle of a group of girls. Moreover, there was a hand on their shoulders. It was the hand of one of those young but extremely beautiful girls with long pink hair. No matter how stupid the man and girl were, they could guess what happened. Obviously, these girls had just made their move. First, she used some unknown method to block the vision of everyone present. Then, the girl with long pink hair rushed into the encirclement of the 3 men in black and brought the two of them out. It only took a split second. As Kaya's followers, the man and girl had good eyesight. They didn't notice it in a hurry, but now they realized that the girls didn't show any signs of fear in the face of 3 peak stage 7 powerhouses. Instead, they looked nonchalant. There were 3 explanations for this. The first was that the girls thought that they could stop the 3 peak stage 7 powerhouses by relying on their numbers. The second was that the girls didn't put the 3 peak stage 7 powerhouses in their eyes at all. The last was that the girls couldn't distinguish each other's strength. Or perhaps they had some trump cards and thought that they could take down the 3 peak stage 7 powerhouses. Of course, it could also be a bluff, a fox borrowing the tiger's might. Or maybe they were just trying to make a move. On the other side, when the 3 men in black realized that the people they were supposed to kill had disappeared and appeared beside the girls, their pupils constricted and they exchanged glances. Unexpectedly, he retreated slightly. Needless to say, The three men in black already had the intention to retreat. But, since the girls had made their move, how could they let the men in black escape? Swoosh! In the next moment, there was an extremely neat and sharp sound of something breaking through the air. The three black-robed men's faces stiffened. Their retreating figures completely froze, and their eyes were filled with horror. It wasn't just the three black-clothed men. Even a man and woman who claimed to be Kaya's followers trembled, shock appearing on their faces. A group of Misaka's sisters appeared around the three men in black. Some of them pointed laser swords at the men in black's throats, while others pointed their heavy cannons at the men in black's forehead. They surrounded the three men in black in the middle and pointed their weapons at their bodies. In an instant, the three peak stage 7 powerhouses were all subdued. Ew, who are you people? One of the black-clothed men's expression changed drastically as he shouted out in a threatening manner. We are from the royal family of the Fea. Hearing this, the group of girls was stunned. Royal family of the Fell Empire? The royal family of the Fea Empire was chasing after Prince Kaya's entourage. Even though the group of girls weren't that slow-witted, they still felt that their brains weren't enough to comprehend the situation after hearing this sentence. While the group of young women were in a daze, the man and the young woman were furious. How dare you claim to be from the royal family of the Fea Empire? The young lady directly pointed at the black-clothed man and angrily scolded. The man also explained to the group of young ladies, "Ladies, these people are all collateral members of the Fea royal family. However, their master has the idea of usurping the throne and sent them to assassinate Prince Kaya in an attempt to seize the throne of the next emperor of the Fea Empire." You're saying that someone from the royal family of the Fea Empire wants to assassinate Prince Kaya in an attempt to usurp the throne? Mikoto opened her mouth in shock. Do you know what time it is now? The magical beast army is invading the Spalier world. The humans of the Spalier world are on the brink of extinction. However, in the face of such a crisis of extinction, the human race was still fighting among themselves and making themselves be attacked from both inside and outside. What kind of idiot would do such a thing? Actually, the collateral family of the Fea Empire's royal family has always had their eyes on the throne. When His Majesty Weia was still a prince, they made trouble for him many times. When Prince Kaya displayed his astounding talent and had a chance of becoming the next emperor, they madly objected. In the end, His Majesty Weia forcefully suppressed them. The man angrily shouted. And this time, Prince Kaya had been ordered to carry out an important mission. Everything had been going smoothly, but when we completed the mission and planned to return to the capital, these collateral members of the royal family suddenly ambushed and assassinated Prince Kaya. Right now, Prince Kaya is resisting with his followers who can still fight. He ordered the two of us to hurry back to the capital and expose the conspiracy of the royal family's collateral branch. However, we were discovered by these three people and were chased all the way here. Mist appeared in the girl's eyes. I wonder if Prince Kaya is still alive. Hinajiku and Mikoto's expression changed slightly. As for Kaya, the two girls' impression of him had stopped at the level of having some dealings with him. He couldn't be considered a friend, but he couldn't be considered a stranger either. Their relationship wasn't shallow, but it wasn't deep either. It was a lukewarm relationship. But back in the Spalier World Academy, Kaya's attitude towards Wu Yan's group was considered friendly. If Kaya was really in a life or death situation, the girls would have to go help him. With that in mind, Hinajiku looked at the man and the girl. Then where's Kaya now? The man and the girl were startled at first. Then they seemed to think of something and hesitated. Could it be that the ladies are planning to rescue Prince Kaya? Mikoto said with displeasure when she saw the two of them hesitating and dragging their feet. Could it be that you want to watch Kaya die? The man and the girl looked at each other and smiled bitterly, revealing a sorrowful expression. Ladies, we thank you on behalf of Prince Kaya for your kind intentions. The man smiled bitterly. But even if the ladies have the advantage in numbers, it's still very dangerous to rescue Prince Kaya. In order to ensure the death of Prince Kaya, the mastermind of the royal family had sent out a peak Type 8 expert 10 Type 8 experts, as well as over 100 Peak Type 7 experts. These 3 men in black had discovered us by chance and chased after us. The girl's eyes turned red. And this time, even though Prince Kaya had 10 rank 8 bodyguards, there wasn't a single peak rank 8. Prince Kaya himself is only a rank 8, and he only has 20 rank 7 bodyguards. Even with the ladies, they aren't a match for those people. In the world of Silveria, the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd ranks were the lower ranks. The 4th, 5th, and 6th ranks were the middle ranks, and the 7th, 8th, and 9th ranks were the upper ranks. The lower, middle, and upper ranks were like watersheds, making the difference between the 3 ranks very obvious. Therefore, only after becoming a powerhouse of the 7th step could warriors and magicians be qualified to call themselves powerhouses. It was also because of this watershed gap that a powerhouse of the 7th step could easily stop a group of 10,000 powerhouses of the 5th step. In the eyes of the man and the young woman, although there were many young women who looked exactly the same, they were too young after all. At best, they had reached the middle of the 5th or 6th order and could not be compared to the high-grade powerhouses who had reached the 7th order. On the other hand, there were over 100 peak rank 7 powerhouses. Even if there weren't any rank 8 powerhouses, it was more than enough to deal with these rank 5 and 6 girls. Of course, the man and the young woman had subconsciously used their age to judge the strength of the young women, but they had completely forgotten that these young women had not only saved them from the hands of 3 peak 7th order black-clothed men in the blink of an eye, but they had also subdued the 3 peak 7th order powerhouses in an instant. In the eyes of Chuju, Mikoto, Yagiya, and Zaisen, this kind of statement was looking down on them. Therefore, the 4 competitive girls immediately shouted in unison, "Don't bullshit. Just bring us there." Chapter 1952. The pitch-black night dyed the green forest a pitch-black color, making the atmosphere extremely oppressive and tense. In an empty space in the forest, a group of people were surrounding a person who was half kneeling on the ground, panting. His face was very pale, and he was holding a luxurious staff in his hand. If one looked closely, one would see that in this group of people, other than a few, the rest were all people in their 20s or 30s. Their auras were abnormally messy, and they were panting. It was clear that they had expended a lot of energy. In the middle of this group of people was a pale-faced young man in his 20s. His face was handsome, but there was a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. It seemed that he had been injured. As for why the young man who was being protected in the middle was injured, it was easy to tell from the angry glares of the people who were protecting him. They're a group of black-clothed people, twice as many as the people around the injured young man, were silently standing there. They were coldly looking at the injured young man, their eyes filled with killing intent. The leader of the group was an old man dressed in black. He was the only one who didn't hide his face and had his hands behind his back. "You can't escape, Prince Kaya," the leading black-clothed old man said indifferently. "How about you just obediently surrender?" Hearing this, Kaya half kneeled on the ground. Even in this life and death situation, he still smiled brightly and said mockingly, "Surrender without a fight? You mean that if I surrender, you will let me go?" The black-clothed old man was silent for a moment and then sighed. My words were inappropriate. This one sentence proved that the black-clothed old man was determined to kill Kaya. However, before the guards and followers around Kaya could get angry, the black-clothed old man changed the topic. "If Prince Kaya is willing to sacrifice himself for others, then I can promise to let your guards and followers go." Hearing this, Kaya's eyes flashed and he hesitated. "Prince Kaya, don't fall into their trap." A guard shouted in grief and indignation. "If you let us go, wait until we return to the capital. Report to His Majesty. His Majesty will definitely be enraged. These lowly branch family members will not be able to withstand His Majesty's fury. Therefore, they will definitely silence us." Kaya laughed bitterly. As the prince of the Fair Empire, he was also a strong candidate for the next emperor. How could Kaya not understand this logic? However, looking at the current situation, Kaya felt that there was no way for him to survive. If only he could save the lives of his subordinates and guards, who had risked their lives for him before he died. Wasn't that a good thing? It could only be said that although Kaya understood, he was still moved and felt a bit of hope towards the black-robed elder's words. Seems like Prince Kaya has chosen to bury these people with you. Seeing that bitter smile on Kaya's face, the black-robed old man could guess what he was thinking. He no longer feigned mercy or attacked with words. Instead, an aura much stronger than an ordinary type 8 expert burst forth. Then I'll let you all die together. Saying this, the black-robed old man did not send his subordinates to attack. He directly leapt up, Do-chi swirling around his body. His body shot out like lightning, turning into an afterimage. He extended a claw and viciously grabbed at Kaya's head. Those shriveled, yet sharp claws continued to enlarge in Kaya's eyes. The surrounding guards and attendants' shouts of shock and anger also entered Kaya's ears. Seeing this attack that was absolutely capable of killing him, Kaya felt as if time had slowed down. The bitter smile on his face grew even more intense. In the God Spirit lands, Kaya had also successfully transformed. During this period of time, his strength had increased by leaps and bounds, fiercely rising by a large margin. If one were to use the system's evaluation to determine his level, Kaya was only in the early stages of the Type 8 and had just reached level 70. Now, he was at least level 75 and had reached the intermediate stage of the Type 8. With Kaya's strength at the intermediate stage of the Type 8, if he went all out and used the wind of dissolution that could negate all energy attacks, even if this black-robed old man was at the peak of the Type 8, Kaya could still exchange a few blows. But it was a pity that he had already exchanged a few blows with the black-robed old man. That was why Kaya was injured. Kaya's injuries weren't too serious and weren't enough to immobilize him, but it was to the extent that it affected his strength. With his current strength and injuries, Kaya couldn't possibly withstand this claw attack from the black-robed old man. At this moment, apart from closing his eyes and waiting for death, Kaya seemed to have no other choice. But it was a pity that the heavens seemed to have decreed that Kaya couldn't die at this moment. Kaya's guards and followers stared with bulging eyes at the deadly claw that was heading for Kaya's head. But just as they thought that Kaya was dead for sure, the sound of something flying through the sky suddenly rang out from the depths of the forest. A streak of light streaked across the sky like a meteor. It didn't take long for it to appear in the air 5 meters above the clearing. At the same time that a beautiful figure appeared, a soft whisper that seemed to have come from the heavens echoed. Aegis, absolute defense circle. Along with the sound, a translucent barrier made of crystals suddenly emerged in front of Kaya, narrowly blocking the claw that was heading for Kaya's head. Clink! In an instant, a crisp collision sounded. The black-robed old man's claw seemed to have collided with a piece of incomparably sturdy steel. A huge rebounding force blasted him back. Bam! The black-robed old man staggered backward with a horrified expression. This sudden turn of events caused everyone present to be stunned. Kaya also stared blankly at the translucent crystal barrier that had saved his life. A moment later, he seemed to have thought of something, and a trace of wild joy and excitement appeared on his pale face. Kaya abruptly turned his head and looked in the direction where the sound of flying had come from. The others also reflexively looked in that direction. What entered their eyes was naturally a beautiful figure with pink wings on her back, looking like an angel. Who else could it be other than Ikaros? Looking at the beautiful figure floating in the air, the angel-like figure that he had dreamt of every night, Kaya, who was always laughing and joking in life and death situations, actually lost his composure. This was the first time he had lost his mind in such a dangerous situation. Not to mention Kaya, even the guards, attendants, black-robed men, and the black-robed old man, who was at the peak of the 8th rank, were momentarily stunned. Their hearts trembled violently at the sight of that beautiful figure. In the end, it was the older black-robed old man who snapped out of his daze in time. His pair of old eyes released a frightening, chilling glint. "Who are you?" Ikaros didn't pay any attention to the black-clothed elder's chilling question. Her dark red eyes rippled like sci-fi frames as she glanced at Ka. Only when she confirmed that Ka was only injured and not seriously injured did she turn her cold face away. Ikaros's disregard for Kaya and the black-robed old man undoubtedly made Kaya extremely disappointed. At the same time, the black-robed old man was enraged. The chilling glint in his eyes intensified. Looks like little girls these days feel that their lives are too long. Powerful Do-Chi suddenly surged out of the black-clothed old man's body. It was like a hot flow that caused the air around the black-clothed old man to distort a couple of times. This caused the expressions of Kaya, his guards, and followers to change. If you want to blame someone, blame yourself for seeing something you shouldn't have. After saying that, the black-clothed old man didn't have any intention of going easy on Ikaros. Instead, he rushed towards Ikaros, who was floating 5 meters above the ground. With a swipe of his claw, even the air was torn apart. The sharp sound of the air being torn apart caused many people's hearts to skip a beat. Be careful! Kaya ignored his injuries and struggled to get up. For what Kaya knew, Ikaros' strength was still the same as when she was in the Spalier World Academy. She was at the 8th rank, but had yet to reach the peak of the 8th rank. It was impossible for her to be a match for the black-robed old man. As long as one wasn't at the peak of the 8th step against the peak of the 8th step powerhouse, if one didn't have enough trump cards, such as the help of a gold armament, even if it was a peak of the 8th step powerhouse, in the end, they would still be defeated and die. This was something Kaya could not tolerate. However, in the next instant, Kaya discovered that he was wrong. Moreover, he was extremely wrong. Peak of the 8th rank? Merely an ant. Chapter 1953. Ikaros didn't show the slightest hint of fear in the face of that incomparably sharp claw that even a peak rank 8 warrior would have to be wary of. She leaned to the side, and the sharp claw covered in hot Do-Chi brought along a sharp gust of wind as it brushed past her body by less than 5 centimeters. The black-clothed old man obviously didn't expect that his full-strength attack, which he used to end the battle as quickly as possible, would miss. He was clearly stunned for a moment before his eyes flashed with anger. His sharp claws moved, and like 5 tiny daggers, they slashed towards Ikaros' face. Facing this attack, Ikaros remained expressionless. Instead, it was Ka who was furious. After all, if this attack landed, even if Ikaros' head didn't explode, her face would be disfigured. How could Ka, who saw Ikaros as a goddess, not be angry? Ikaros, on the other hand, was the only one who didn't seem to care. She raised her hand, and an aegis the size of a bowl appeared and collided with the black-clad old man's claw. Clang! The black-clothed old man's claw kept rubbing against the surface of the aegis. It caused a sharp creaking sound that pierced one's eardrums. On the other hand, Ikaros waved her hand and deactivated the aegis. She turned around, and the wings on her back flapped heavily on the black-clothed old man's body. Pump! Amidst the low, muffled sound, the black-clothed old man let out a miserable cry, as if he had been hit by something heavy. The sound of bones breaking came from his body, and his figure flew backwards, smashing into the ground. Poochie! A mouthful of dark red blood spurted out from the black-clothed old man's mouth. Blood splattered all over the ground, but the black-clothed old man didn't care. He cried out with a face full of shock. "You're a rank 9 warrior?" Ka's guards and followers were overjoyed to see the black-clothed old man defeated in an instant. They were about to cheer when the black-clothed old man's words stunned them. Rank 9 warrior? This girl is a rank 9 warrior? No way. It was unknown who said this in a hoarse voice. Everyone present, be it Ka's guards, followers, or the black-clothed men brought by the black-clothed old man, didn't pay any attention to it. It wasn't that they didn't want to pay attention to it, but the words rank 9 warrior occupied their minds. They didn't have the energy to think about anything else. Rank 9. Ka stared blankly at Ikaros. Her eyes had turned crimson. Her usual pitiful temperament was gone. replaced by an incomparably cold aura. She hovered in the air for a long time, then exhaled. The light in his eyes dimmed. As a prince of the Faya Empire, Ka was humble and courteous, but there were times when he admired others. For example, Sylph, who had always suppressed him in the Spalier World Academy, was someone he admired greatly. There were times when he idolized others as well. For example, Ka's father, Emperor Weya of the Faya Empire, had always been Ka's idol. There were times when Ka admired someone. That was Ikaros, who was as beautiful as an angel. She had never felt inferior before. Ka broke through to rank 8 at the tender age of 20. Apart from Ailu Empire's Princess Sylph and Baruba Empire's Prince Jaffer, he was the most talented person in the Faya Empire. Ka was a prince of the Faya Empire. Not only was he the biological son of Emperor Weya, he was also a strong candidate for the throne. He could be said to be above everyone else. In addition, Kaya himself was handsome and elegant, with an extraordinary air about him. He was the prince charming in the hearts of every young girl. He had the looks, the air, and the air about him. His status, strength, and talent were all above the rest. How could he possibly feel inferior? But now, Ka really did feel inferior. Moreover, he was feeling inferior because of his sweetheart. For the first time in his life, Kaya felt like he wasn't worthy of this goddess of Silveria. He couldn't find a second person like her. Bang, 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 bang. At this moment, an incomparably chaotic, muffled sound, mixed with a series of screams, resounded, waking up everyone who had fallen into a daze because of the words ninth stage expert. When everyone raised their eyes and looked towards the source of the sound, the scene that entered everyone's eyes caused everyone to be stunned once again. There was no other reason other than the group of men in black who wanted to assassinate Ka were all lying on the ground. No one knew if they were dead or alive. Beside each of the fallen men in black, there were young girls with the same face and expression. Even their height, figure were exactly the same. They held laser swords and heavy cannons in their hands. Looking at the fallen men in black, it wasn't hard to imagine what had just happened. Ikaros. Then, Chuju, Mikoto, Yaguya, and Shisen appeared at the head of the group of Misaka's sisters. They were so fast that even the rank 8 fighters didn't notice them. Originally, Hinajiku, who was the fastest among the girls, should be the first to arrive. But Yukiya and Yukiya are wind elves, and Mikoto is a lightning elemental user. Comparing speed, catching up to Ikaros shouldn't be difficult. However, the battle was already over by the time the group of girls appeared. This showed how little time it took for Ikaros to use Aegis to save Kaya and defeat the peak of the 8-step black-clad old man. That's why even though it's complicated to describe, the time between Ikaros' arrival and the appearance of the girls with the Misaka sisters can be counted in seconds. In that short amount of time, 1 peak rank 8, 10 peak rank 8, 100 peak rank 7, a total of 111 peak rank 8 fighters were completely subdued. This caused Kaya's subordinates and guards, who had just been in mortal danger because of these people, to be unable to react. The black-robed old man immediately roared out, "Let's go. Who the hell are you people?" Hearing this, the group of girls looked at each other, smiled, and said in unison, "We are from the otherworldly capital." Otherworldly capital? What kind of faction is that? I've never heard of it before. Oomph. Yaguya puffed out his chest and spoke with a proud expression. "My lord's name is Wu Yen." Wu Yen. As soon as these words came out, the entire place was filled with cries of surprise and surprise. There was no one in the Spalier world who didn't know Wu Yen. That's because he had 2 identities. Ailu Empire's princess, Sylph's fiancé, the youngest rank 9 fighter in history. These 2 identities were enough to make a person famous in the Spalier world. Even the old man in black robes narrowed his eyes. He slammed his palm on the ground and used the force to propel himself up into the sky. Alas, such a panicked choice had a tragic ending. The old man in black robes seemed to have forgotten that he couldn't go any higher than 5 meters above the ground. Bang! Up! With a loud crash and a scream, the black-clothed old man was sent flying back as if he had hit a steel plate. He smashed into the ground again, and his head tilted to one side. He had actually fainted. Everyone was silent as they watched this scene. A peak stage 8th Order powerhouse. That's a fighter on the same level as the patriarchs of the 9 great houses. It was one thing for such a powerhouse to be defeated by stage 9 powerhouse, but in the end he actually fell to such a state. If this matter were spread out, the black-clothed old man's reputation would probably be in an extremely sorry state. Hinajiku, Mikoto, Agia, Yuhin, and Ikaros flew down from the sky to Ka's side. They looked at the pale Ka and asked in a low voice, "Are you all right?" "I'm fine. I'm fine." Ka glanced at Ikaros. Ikaros's eyes had returned to their original indigo color. Ka's heart skipped a beat. He couldn't help but think of Wu Yan's figure. His expression turned gloomy, but he quickly regained his spirit and spoke in a serious tone. "We can't stay here for long. I'm afraid there might be more pursuers behind us. Let's find a place to settle down first." The group of girls naturally had no objections and nodded in agreement. Chapter 1954. The night was still going on, within the forest shrouded in darkness. The cries of birds, beasts, and insects could occasionally be heard, seemingly waking up the birds that were resting. From time to time, the fluttering of wings could be heard echoing through the forest. Everything seemed so peaceful and tranquil. In a corner of the dense forest, at the bottom of a cliff, a pitch-black cave stood there. It was like an eye on the cliff, giving people goosebumps just by looking at it from afar. It was also like a mouth on the cliff, giving people the feeling that if they walked in, they would never be able to walk out again. Even so, at this moment, in this pitch-black cave, a large group of people was waiting there. They were like mountain kings, guarding the entrance of the cave while walking around the cave. Even on the walkway outside the cave, there were people holding their weapons tightly. Their cold eyes swept the surroundings. With one look, one could tell that they were patrolling and guarding against something. At the bottom of the pitch-black cave, a bonfire slowly burned. Light smoke drifted up from within, following the direction of the airflow. Just as it was about to spread towards the cave entrance, it was absorbed by a small crystal the moment it floated up, disappearing into the air without even leaving behind a trace of a strange smell. This crystal was originally used to store water, air, food, and the like, in case it was needed in an emergency. However, in order to prevent the smoke from drifting out of the cave and being discovered by the pursuers, the crystal was reduced to absorbing the smoke from the bonfire. It cannot be said that it was a waste of materials, but it could be said that it was a good way to deal with the situation. Chuju, Mikoto, Ikaros, Yakuya, Yushin, and the rest of the girls sat around the bonfire. Ka, whose face had regained some color, was also sitting there. The Misaka sisters were all hiding outside, protecting everyone in the dark. Therefore, the ones who were actually patrolling, guarding, and stopping enemies were the Misaka sisters who were hiding around the cave, not Kai's attendants and guards. The reason why they were hiding was because they wanted to save Kaya some face. After all, even if Kaya didn't mind being protected by a group of still wet behind the ears girls, those attendants of the peak of the 7th rank and guards of the 8th rank at the very least wouldn't mind. Such an arrangement was to give Kaya face. Of course, Ka was aware of this as well. His heart was filled with admiration and gratitude for the attentiveness of these girls. Of course, most of his attention was still on Ikaros. This much could be seen from the way Ka would occasionally turn his gaze to Ikaros. This action could be said to be completely subconscious on Ka's part. It was similar to how boys and girls who had just awakened to love would often unconsciously observe their sweetheart in class. But the more Ka did this, the more depressed he felt. The reason was simple. From start to finish, Ikaros just sat there, her blue eyes reflecting the light of the bonfire as if it was burning. Even though it was beautiful, the colors were dim and her expression unfocused. Obviously, Ikaros was in a daze, not noticing Ka at all. How could Ka not be disappointed? Ikaros didn't do this to hurt Ka or intentionally ignore him. It's just that whenever Wu Yin wasn't around, Ikaros would just sit there in a daze. Since she couldn't see the figure of her dreams all the time, she could only immerse herself in her memories and picture that figure in her heart over and over again. Of course, if Ka were to find out about this, it'd be even crueler than ignoring him. Other than Ikaros, the other girls also noticed Ka's actions. This made Hinajiku and Mikoto feel helpless, while Yukiya and Yukinori exchanged glances and started whispering to each other. Hey, Shisien. Yagiya glanced at Ka from the corner of his eye and whispered, Isn't this person a little weird? Gasp. Shisien softly replied, Because this is the first time I've seen someone from this world. Maybe everyone in this world is like this. Is that so? Jejuya crossed his arms and tilted his head. He closed his eyes and pretended to be deep in thought. After a long time, he finally spoke. I see. Everyone in this world is weird. Ka, who was paying attention to Ikaros, didn't hear the conversation, but Hinajiku and Mikoto did. They could only shake their heads in annoyance and break the deadlock. Prince Ka, Chuju was the first to speak. Can I ask you a question? Only then did Kaya come to his senses. His expression returned to normal as he nodded. If I know, I'll help you solve it. It's not that important. Hinajiku quickly waved her hand, hesitated for a moment, and said, Actually, after we entered Faya Empire, we noticed that we couldn't fly more than 5 meters above the ground. Do you know why? So that's the problem. Kaya suddenly understood and then smiled. Miss Chuju, there's no need to worry. It's nothing out of the ordinary. It's just something we use to deal with the demonic beast army. Something to deal with the demonic beast army? Hinajiku, Mikoto, Yagiya, and Yushin perked up. Even Ikaros turned to look at him. Ka puffed out his chest and nodded. I'm sure everyone knows that there are many flying beasts in the demonic beast army, right? Ka sighed. Due to the existence of these flying beasts, we're at a huge disadvantage when we use the capital as our base to fight them. They can ignore the defense of the city walls, and they can also increase their altitude to make our attacks miss. It's hard to even detect them. Plus, flying has many advantages in battle. There are many hidden threats. We want to get rid of these threats. At this point, Hinajiku and Mikoto had a pretty good idea of what was going on. To deal with these flying beasts, the Faya royal family must have used some method to turn the skies of Faya Empire into a forbidden zone. They must have eliminated the flying beast's huge advantage. The ancestor of the Faya Empire's royal family, the god who created the Faya Empire, Faya, once had the title of God of the Wind. Therefore, the people of the Faya Empire's royal family are very good at practicing and using wind magic or wind-related techniques and combat skills. As expected, Ka explained with a light smile. When our Faya ancestor was still alive, he carved 77 magical formations on the borders of Faya Empire. These formations alone don't have much of an effect. But if all of them are activated by injecting magical energy, they can create a forbidden zone. Due to the flying beasts being troublesome, my father remembered reading about this in an ancient book of the royal family. He had the idea of using it to restrict the flying beasts. At this point, Ka's tone was filled with admiration for Wei's wisdom. Then, it turned into helplessness. This time, I left the royal city under my father's orders to activate these 77 anti-flight magic circles at the border of the kingdom. Who knew that it would lead to an assassination attempt from the collateral family? Are these people really going to disregard the Faya Empire that is in danger just for the throne? Chuju and Mikoto shut their mouths. Let's not talk about the fact that this is someone else's family matter. Even if they like to poke their nose into other people's business, they can't do anything about it. Just the fact that the other party didn't care about the safety of the country and did something like this already made Hinajiku and Mikoto feel disgusted. Naturally, they didn't want to continue this topic. However, your ancestor sure is arrogant. Yagiya snorted and turned his head away in dissatisfaction. You dare to call yourself God of the Wind in front of us hurricane, witches, and fairies Abachi? Is this a provocation? Yushin nodded in agreement with Yagiya's words. It was obvious that she didn't like the title of God of the Wind. But that was to be expected. After all, these sisters were wind elves and were very competitive. It wasn't strange for them to behave like this. Kaya, on the other hand, wasn't going to take this seriously. Then, Prince Ka, you should have other methods to travel, right? Mikoto changed the topic and asked. Otherwise, it would take a lot of time to travel around Faya Empire's borders. Of course I do. Kaya suddenly laughed. If you don't mind, why don't you follow Ka to the capital? Only then did the group of girls smile in satisfaction. Or 11:52. Chapter 1955. As time passed, the night approached dawn step by step. The moonlight spilling from the horizon moved along with the rising moon, bringing about an indescribable tranquility. No matter who it was, they wouldn't be willing to break this tranquility. Below the cliff and in front of the cave, the guards and attendants of the Faya Empire's princes were still vigilant. They didn't slack off at all as they dutifully patrolled inside and outside the cave. They just wanted to give their masters a moment of peace. Not long after, a wave of footsteps suddenly reverberated from within the cave, causing the expressions of those who were on alert and patrolling to turn stern. The Do Chi and magic power within their bodies were instantly mobilized and slowly activated. However, when everyone present turned their gazes to the location of the footsteps and saw the scene there, the slowly rising Do Chi and magic force directly stagnated in everyone's body and gradually shrank back. The owner of the footsteps was a young lady with pink wings on her back. The young lady walked out of the cave as though there was no one around. Her indigo pupils flickered in an extraordinary splendor like the starlight. Her delicate, beautiful face displayed an adorable and delicate expression, vividly displaying the pitiful temperament of the angelic young lady, attracting everyone's attention. Gazing at the angelic young lady, the attendants and guards were absent-minded. It was as though they couldn't associate this delicate young lady with the incomparably cold figure of the 9th-stage powerhouse who defeated a peak 8th-stage powerhouse not long ago. In an instant, they were at a loss. The angelic young lady continued to walk to the empty space in front of the cave. She lifted her head and gazed at the moon in the sky. The pink wings on her back gradually extended. Whoosh! A chilly wind blew past, causing the leaves to flutter in the air. It swept past the angel-like girl's delicate body. Her pink feathers fluttered in the wind. They intertwined with the leaves and hovered around the young lady. In a night sky, the moonlight seemed to have been summoned and sprinkled onto the young lady's devastatingly beautiful face. The young lady's indigo pupils were even more dazzling, incomparably deep. Moreover, the angelic young lady gazed at the moon as though praying to the night sky. At this moment, no one could compare to her beauty. At this moment, no matter if it was patrolling, guarding, protecting the prince, the 9th-stage powerhouse, or the attack of the magical beasts, everything disappeared from the minds of the people who witnessed this scene. Even their breaths held in an instant, leaving the surroundings in an abnormally silent state. Everyone could only stare blankly at the angelic girl under the moon who was so beautiful that she didn't seem to belong to the mortal world. They were unable to return to their senses for a long time. If nothing unexpected happened, this scene would become an unforgettable scene in the hearts of those who were fortunate enough to witness this beautiful scene. Every time they fell asleep, it would appear in their dreams. After who knew how much time had passed, another set of footsteps sounded from within the cave, startling the group of people who had been mesmerized for who knew how long. By the time they reacted and looked towards the cave, Kaya's figure had entered everyone's field of vision. The group of attendants and guards was just about to salute when Kaya raised his hand and stopped them. His eyes didn't turn to look at the people around him, but instead at the young lady who was standing there, spreading her wings and whispering something to the moon. His gaze wavered a few times, but in the end, he couldn't restrain himself, and a trace of love emerged. But at the same time, a trace of panic appeared in Kaya's eyes. It wasn't that Kaya was making a fuss over nothing. Rather, this scene was just too beautiful, so beautiful that the angelic young lady seemed as though she could fly to the moon at any moment and be summoned back by the heavens that should belong to her. Although this thought was too laughable, Kaya couldn't help but panic. Unable to restrain himself, he walked forward but didn't reach the young lady's side. Instead, he stopped not far behind her. This wasn't of Kaya's own volition. His footsteps came to a natural stop. The distance between Kaya and the young lady seemed to be hinting at something, forming an invisible barrier that blocked Kaya's path. Miss Ikaros. Kaya fell silent for a moment before uttering a sentence that didn't hurt or itch. Why aren't you sleeping? Ikaros didn't seem to realize someone was approaching until now. She turned around, her indigo eyes staring straight at Kaya. Kaya felt like he could be sucked in at any moment, unable to extricate himself. He couldn't help but tilt his head away. Ikaros didn't understand why Kaya suddenly turned his head away. But that's that. Given Ikaros' simple-minded emotional circuitry, she couldn't understand anything. She could only answer Kaya's question honestly. I don't need to sleep. You don't need to sleep? This caused Kaya to be startled and puzzled. What do you mean? Ikaros lowered her head slightly. The expression on her face from beginning to end was one that made people feel pity for her. I don't have the ability to sleep. Of course, Kaya didn't understand what she was saying. Originally, he wanted to probe into the secrets of his goddess, but when he saw Ikaros' heartbreaking expression, he couldn't bring himself to ask. All he could do was silently curse himself for being like this. After all, Ka had always been a gentleman, his emotions rarely fluctuating. But not only did Ikaros' every move affect Ka's emotions, every time she did, Ka's status would drop by a notch. One can only say that everything has its vanquisher. In the end, Kaya could only interpret it as Ikaros cultivating some sort of special technique. Even though it gave her strength that he couldn't catch up to, it came at the price of not being able to sleep. It's not uncommon to have techniques, or magic that require a certain price to cultivate. The more benefits there are, the more drawbacks there are as well. It's no wonder Kaya thought of this. Whenever he thought about how Ikaros was sighing at the sky alone in the middle of the night while he was sleeping soundly, Kaja couldn't help but feel a little upset. He couldn't help but ask, then, does Miss Ikaros feel lonely? Kaya regretted it as soon as he asked. Asking a girl if she's lonely in the middle of the night? Isn't this too frivolous? But Ikaros pondered seriously for a moment and was at a loss for what to do. When Master isn't around, my energy furnace becomes weird. Is this reaction called loneliness? A question mark almost floated above Ka's head. Obviously, he was confused by Ikaros' words. However, Ka understood the gist of it. Kaya knew this so-called master was how Ikaros addressed Wu Yin. Kaya didn't know what that meant, but according to Ikaros' translation, once Wu Yin isn't around, Ikaros will feel lonely. This made Kaya's heart ache a little, but for the first time, he looked directly at Ikaros and asked in a serious tone, "Do you love Wu Yin?" "Love." Ikaros froze. Ripples appeared in her indigo eyes. She pressed a hand to her chest, and after a moment of silence, she spoke. Her voice was as soft as a warm breeze, slowly spreading to the surroundings. Master said, when you're happy, you're happier than yourself. When you're sad, you're sadder than yourself. When you're happy, you're happier than yourself. When you're in pain 100 times, 1,000 times, 10,000 times more pain than yourself. That means that person loves you. Kaya tried to put himself in her shoes and couldn't help but nod. But Ikaros' next sentence froze him in place. If this is what love is, Ikaros said with a voice so soft that it could disappear at any moment. But her voice was firm and firm. Then I should be in love with Master. Kaya's body shuddered, and he lowered his head, his expression unreadable. After a while, he looked back up with a bitter expression. Is that so? In the next moment, Kaya turned around. As he walked towards the cave, he said those words with an indescribable tone. I wish you happiness. Watching Ka's back slowly disappear into the distance, Ikaros was a little confused. She lifted her head to look at the night sky, lost in her thoughts of her lover. Chapter 1956. The next morning, when the sunlight poured down, dyeing the entire forest a golden yellow. In front of a cave in a corner of the forest, Kaya and a group of attendants and guard were standing there as if they had been waiting for a long time. They were chatting and laughing in low voices. Chuju, Mikoto, Ikaros, Yakuya, Yushien, and the other girls walked out of the cave, causing the lively forest to quiet down for a moment. Almost at the same time, silhouettes appeared from the nearby forest and landed behind a group of girls, neatly lining up. These people were naturally the Misaka sisters who had been secretly protecting everyone present. Ka's entourage and guards couldn't help but look curiously at the Misaka sisters. When they saw Chuju, Mikoto, Ikaros, Yakuya, and Yushien, their gazes turned into respect. Yesterday, Ikaros defeated the peak rank 8 old man in black. Chuju and Mikoto were famous people in the Spalier World Academy. For Yakuya and Yushien to be able to stand with them, there must be something special about them. Under such circumstances and thinking, even though the group of girls was ridiculously young, they were still young. In fact, amongst the attendants and guards present, there wasn't a single person younger than them. But power was power. The girls' reputation had long since surpassed that of everyone present, and they were now second only to Kaya. Aside from the Misaka sisters, a group of girls passed through the crowd and came to the front. They exchanged glances with Ka and nodded to each other. Ka even flashed a smile, not at all losing his composure like yesterday when he was talking to Ikaros. Mikoto went straight to the point. Then, how are we going to get to the capital? Do we need to prepare anything? Ladies, don't worry. Ka smiled. He raised his head and looked at the blue sky in the distance, attracting the attention of everyone present. Everything that needs to be prepared has been prepared. As soon as Ka's voice fell in the sky, a huge black shadow suddenly appeared. A huge shadow. Awe-inspiring. It's an airship. The airship's massive shadow flitted through the air like a plane about to land as it glided in this direction. It slowly lowered its altitude and landed on the empty ground. Finally, under the girl's surprise, it stopped in front of the empty ground amidst a cloud of dust. Airship. Ikaros remained expressionless as she stared at the giant airship in front of her. This was the first time Ikaros had seen an airship, but Hinajiku and Mikoto had a look of surprise in their eyes. Didn't they say the sky above 5 meters is a forbidden zone? Why is there an airship that can fly? There are only 3 airships that can fly in the skies of Faya Empire. Ka seemed to have predicted the girl's reaction and explained. These 3 airships are engraved with magic circles that Father painstakingly found from books. They are immune to the effects of the forbidden airspace domain. Last night, I used the communication crystal to contact Father, and Father sent this airship over. It will bring us back to the Faya Empire's capital city. Only then did Hinajiku and Mikoto nod in relief. Get over there. At this time, Kaya's entourage and guards also brought a group of men in black with shackles on their hands. The one leading them was the old man who tried to assassinate Kaya last night, but was killed by Ikaros in one move. The old man in black had wanted to vent his anger on the guards and attendants who were pushing him around, but when he saw Ikaros standing in the middle of the group of girls beside Kaya, the anger on his old face disappeared and turned into a look of fear. He didn't even dare to look at Ikaros. Obviously, the old man was traumatized by Ikaros' attack. However, the old man was still quite strong-willed in front of Prince Ka. Prince Ka, I may not be of Faya Empire's royal bloodline, but I'm still a member of the royal family. What is the meaning of this? After saying that, the black-clothed old man raised his hand and showed the shackles to Kaya. His intention was very clear. He wanted Kaya to remove his shackles. These aren't ordinary shackles. They're special tools that can seal the flow of Do-Chi and mana. Otherwise, Ka wouldn't be able to let a peak rank 8 who tried to assassinate him last night travel with him. Upon hearing the black-clothed old man's words, the expressions of the guards and attendants turned terrifyingly grim. They were filled with rage. Assassinating a prince is a serious crime. In the Spalier world, there's no such thing as 9 familial exterminations, but a man is responsible for his own actions. Since the old man tried to assassinate Ka, it's only natural that he'd be executed when he returns. Now, he's actually objecting to being restrained after the failed assassination. He's only allowed to kill and not allow others to shackle him. No matter how arrogant he is, there has to be a limit, right? A member of Faya Empire's royal family, Prince Kaya didn't retaliate against the black-clothed elder's shamelessness. He only said with a smile that wasn't a smile, "I hope you'll still dare to say the same in front of my father." The old man's expression changed. The old man is indeed a member of Faya Empire's royal family. He's also a member of the Branch family who tried to usurp the throne. This assassination attempt had already failed. It would have been fine if they had died, but since they had been captured alive, Wei would definitely think of a way to pry open the mouths of the black-clothed old man and the black-clothed men when they returned, forcing them to reveal the mastermind behind the scenes. If the old man really dares to say he's a member of Faya Empire's royal family, then wouldn't he be indirectly admitting that the person who ordered him to assassinate Ka is a Branch family member of Faya Empire's royal family? Navia's rage will definitely cause the entire Branch family to suffer a thunderous blow. Thus, the black-clothed old man immediately shut his mouth. Ka glanced at the old man and didn't ask any more questions. He waved his hand. "Bring them up." "Yes." The group of attendants and guards immediately pressed down on the black-clothed old man and the black-clothed man, cursing as they chased them onto the airship. It was as if they were venting their anger for nearly losing their lives at the hands of the black-clothed men last night. Ka shook his head and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He looked at the girls. "Everyone, let's go up." Chuju, Makoto, Ikaros, Yukino, and the girls nodded. They looked at each other and leaped up. Their bodies turned into streaks of light and flew towards the deck of the airship. In the next moment, they appeared on the deck of the airship. The Misaka sisters followed suit, and all of them leaped up. While making sure they weren't more than 5 meters above the ground, they flew up one after another. It didn't take long for the deck of the airship to be filled with people. Kaya's attendants, guards, and black-clothed men glanced at each other, regretting that they hadn't done so earlier. Even Kaya was stunned. He couldn't help but laugh, and with a flash, he stood up and stood at the head of the deck. "Let's go." Ka looked straight ahead. To Faya Empire's royal city. Virum. As soon as Ka's voice fell, the enormous airship trembled. The engine started up, and a magical circle appeared behind it. Like a propeller, the airship spewed out a violent shock wave and slowly rose into the air. As the airship rose into the air, the forest below became smaller and smaller. After a while, the entire forest was within the view of the group standing on the deck of the airship. Under the azure sky, the huge floating airship rotated and determined a direction. The magic array behind it also rotated and sped off in a certain direction. Seeing the forest that took them 2 days to walk through disappear from their sight in an instant, the girls heaved a sigh of relief. Ikaros and Yukino stretched their backs and enjoyed the breeze. The smell of the sky is still better. Hinajiku, Mikoto, and Hinajiku smiled faintly, and together with Ikaros, they looked towards the direction of the airship, their eyes flashing with determination. In Faya Empire's royal city, what awaited the girls was a battle against a pseudo-demigod. Although they couldn't say that they had to lose this battle, in order to reduce the pressure on Wu Yan in the future, the girls made up their minds. They must defeat the pseudo-demigod Beast King. Chapter 1957. Whoosh! A sharp sound pierced through the air. A gigantic creature shuttled through the air, leaving a trail of clouds behind it as it flew into the distance at a shocking speed. Watching the scenery around them recede at an extremely fast speed, Yigeya and Shixian leaned over the railing of the airship deck, leisurely enjoying the breeze as they gestured at the scenery around them. It seemed as though they were in the middle of a daily conversation. Shuju and Makoto were amused and envious of the Bawu sisters' intimate actions that were comparable to a couple's. Sometimes they would quarrel with each other, sometimes they would play with each other, and sometimes they would glare at each other angrily. Shuju and Makoto had heard a little about the Bawu sisters from Wu Yan. Naturally, they knew that not only were the twin sisters once split from the same body, but they also knew that the Bawu sisters fought each other for the sake of the fate of only one of them surviving. However, the meaning of this fight was incomparable to the meaning of ordinary fights. If it were another two people, they would know that sooner or later the two of them would merge into one. If only one of them could survive, they would definitely try their best to kill the other for their own survival. But when it came to the Bawu sisters, this pair of sisters fought each other for the sake of the other, sacrificing themselves for the other to survive. The Bawu sisters became Wu Yan summons not long ago and followed Wu Yin to the Spalier world. As soon as they arrived in the Spalier world, the Bawu sisters entered the diluted magical lake to transform. After the transformation, a series of events happened. The girls didn't even have time to greet them and hurriedly prepared to head to the three empires to deal with the Beast King. So at first, for the Bawu sisters who met and interacted with each other for the first time, Chuju and Mikoto weren't familiar with each other. But after hearing about this matter, whether it was Chuju, Mikoto, or the other girls, even Ikaros, they had a whole new level of respect for the Bawu sisters. They were filled with enthusiasm. They just met each other. He had just joined the team. The reason why Chuju, Mikoto, and Ikaros were able to get familiar with the Baba sisters in just 2 to 3 days. Therefore, the Bawu sisters were very close to each other and couldn't do without each other. Sometimes they would fight, sometimes they would quarrel, but in the next second, they would become close again. Hinajiku and Mikoto were very envious, but they also knew that this was a relationship that no one could imitate. Of course, even though they didn't have a special sisterly relationship like the Baba sisters, Chuju, Mikoto, and the other girls all saw each other as their own sisters, even if they weren't related by blood. It's just that Mikoto seems to be a blood-related sister, right? Moreover, there were 20,000 of them. Chuju's gaze inadvertently swept over the main seat of the airship deck. She saw Kaya standing there in a daze, gazing into the distance. After a moment of silence, she turned back to Ikaros. Ikaros, please take care of Yakuya and Yushin. Don't let them run around. Ikaros tilted her head. She didn't seem to understand the meaning of this sentence, but she still nodded and agreed. Mikoto. Chuju grabbed Mikoto's hand and walked towards Kaya. Come with me to find Kaya. Mikoto was surprised at first, but then she seemed to have guessed Chuju's intentions. She nodded and followed behind Kaya. Prince Kaya, who seemed to be thinking about something, calmed down when he saw Hinajiku and Mikoto walking over. He discreetly glanced at Ikaros's position, indirectly explaining what he was thinking about just now. Then, he revealed a graceful smile. Chuju-san, Mikoto-san, is there something you need? Chuju and Mikoto nodded. We'd like to ask you about the situation in Feidi's capital. Mikoto's brown eyes turned serious. Kaya, what's the situation between Feidi's capital and the demons? Hearing Hinajiku and Mikoto bring this up, Kaya was a little surprised, as if he was hesitating whether he should explain it or not. But when he thought of Ikaros's strength that could very well reach the 9th order, he changed his mind. The 12 elders of the council are all Tier 9 combatants, and they're the ones in charge of the 3 great clans and royalty of the 3 great empires. In other words, in the 3 great empires, other than the 3 guardian deities, the emperor of the royal family and the elders of the 3 great clans are the strongest combatants an empire can muster, and there were only 4 of them in a single empire. Now, Ikaros has displayed power that could very well be a Tier 9 combatant. Chuju and Mikoto were once famous fighters in the Spalier World Academy. Even Kaya couldn't tell how strong Ikaros and Yushin are. Clearly, they're going to be a huge help. In addition to the Misaka sisters who took care of 100 peak Tier 7 combatants in an instant last night, Kaya felt that he had to get this power to help Feidi Empire. Kaya nodded and spoke. Before I left the city, the demons of the demons had already come into contact with Feidi Empire's defensive barrier. Although they didn't break through, my father felt that if this continued, the barrier would eventually be destroyed. That's why he sent me out to activate the forbidden airspace domain to eliminate the threat of the flying demons. Currently, other than the battle prowess of level 9, both the Faya Empire and the Magical Beast Army have sent level 8 fighters into battle several times. I believe that in the near future, even level 9 fighters and level 9 magical beasts will have no choice but to join the battle. At this point, Kai sighed. Fortunately, Fady Empire's guardian deity and the demons of the demons are still behind the scenes and haven't made a move yet. Otherwise, when the demigod combatants fight, the victor would be the one to decide victory. As long as one side's demigod combatant wins, then there's no need to continue fighting. Because if one side doesn't have a demigod combatant, even if the side with a demigod combatant doesn't send out a single soldier, just the strength of a demigod combatant alone can wipe out an army no matter how big it is. Unless the other side has 100 Tier 9 combatants, but that's just a pipe dream. That's why Kaya said this. Hinajiku and Mikoto were both surprised and speechless at the same time. According to Kaya's words, Fady Empire doesn't seem to know that their guardian deity is in the capital of a different era and can't leave. Fady Empire is the side without a demigod combatant and could be wiped out at any time. Perhaps Fady Empire's Emperor Weya already knows that their guardian deity isn't in the capital, but didn't say it out loud to prevent despair. The demons of the demons of the demons also don't know about this, so they haven't made a move yet. In other words, Fady Empire could be wiped out at any time. With that in mind, Hinajiku and Mikoto exchanged glances and decided not to mention it for the time being. At the very least, they couldn't mention it in front of everyone or it would cause panic and anger. Perhaps the attendants, guards, and even Kaya would be hostile towards them. So, should you change the topic? Then, did your father say what he plans to do next? Now, the flying demons are no longer of any use. The demons of the demons have been greatly weakened. Father said that if the situation is optimistic, he will take the initiative to attack. Kaya puffed out his chest as if he was proud. As long as the demons of the demons are eradicated, even if the demons are still around, they won't be able to attack Fady Empire without soldiers. With the guardian deity there, the demons won't be stupid enough to challenge us directly. Then, it will be Fady Empire's victory. Hearing this, Chuju and Mikoto couldn't help but admire Kaya. With the demons of the demons attacking Fady Empire, Weya would definitely discuss it with the guardian deity. Thus, Weya must have realized that the guardian deity isn't around, and in the absence of the guardian deity, Fady Empire could be wiped out at any time. Yet, Weya was still willing to take such a risk and take the initiative to eradicate the demons of the demons. If Weya could really eradicate the demons of the demons before the demons make a move, then the guardian deity would really be able to intimidate the demons. Without the demons of the demons wouldn't recklessly attack Fady Empire. In this way, Fady Empire would be able to win this war without the guardian deity. Provided that the demons don't make a move before the demons of the demons are destroyed, while everyone was preoccupied with their own thoughts, the Fey Empire's royal city appeared in everyone's line of sight. Chapter 1958. Faya Empire, King City. This was a city surrounded by tall city walls with a golden palace in the center. It was very similar to Ailu Empire's King City. The only difference was that Ailu Empire's King City was located in the middle of a mountain range. It was surrounded by mountains and looked like a basin. Faya Empire's King City was located in half a forest. Why half a forest? This was because the front of the Faya Empire's royal city was a vast expanse of flat land. However, the left, right, and back were filled with towering trees. It was as though the front of an O-shaped forest had been flattened. The Faya Empire's royal city was situated at the front of the flattened forest. Therefore, Faya Empire was located in half a forest. At this moment, in a palace in Faya Empire's King City, Vaya with a golden crown was standing at the front. He was looking at the wall in front of him with his back facing everyone in the palace. In the hall, Hinajiku, Mikoto, Ikaros, Yigia, Yakaina, and the other girls were standing to the side, as if they were just here to watch a show, as if it had nothing to do with them. Kaya was standing in the middle of the palace. The old man in black with his hands and cheese shackled was kneeling beside Kaya. He was facing Vea, who had his back facing everyone. Other than the girls, Vea, Kaya, and the old man in black, there were two other people in the palace. One of them was about the same age as Vea. He looked to be in his 40s or 50s. He wasn't considered old, but he was definitely older than middle-aged. One of them was about the same age as Kaya, looking to be in his 20s or 30s. His eyes kept sneaking furtive glances at the group of young girls. His eyes flashed with surprise, greed, wickedness, and other emotions. His clothes were luxurious, but his face was incomparably pale. It was clear that he had overindulged himself and was a man who couldn't be helped up to the wall. Naturally, the group of girls noticed that this nouveau riche, a rich young master, who gave off an extremely bad first impression, was peeking at them. But other than Yakuya and Yushin, who were treated this way for the first time and frowned in disgust, Hinajiku and Mikoto, who weren't treated this way for the first time, only glanced at it and completely ignored it. As for Ikaros, that goes without saying. Even if this guy's performance was better than Kaya's, Ikaros wouldn't even spare him half a glance. She'd just stand there and not say a word. After maintaining this scene for an unknown amount of time, Wea turned around and looked at the group of girls with a faint smile. "How's that little guy doing now?" The girls were stunned for a moment. Then Hinajiku and Mikoto realized who the little guy Wea was talking about was. Their faces darkened, and they smiled bitterly. "We don't know how Yin is doing." Chuju shook her head in front of Vea and Kaya's shocked faces. "He left the capital of another era to deal with the Beast King. We don't know how he is, but he must be doing his best. Is that so?" Vea nodded. He didn't ask anything about the to deal with the Beast King part, as if he already knew everything. Then let's believe in that little guy. He's a super genius that Kite always praises. Chuju and Mikoto nodded heavily. Ikaros, Iya, and Yushin also had different expressions, but the trust they had for Yin Liqiang was the same. She didn't know if Wea really trusted Wu Yin, or if she chose to trust Wu Yin because of Kate's praise. Either way, it doesn't matter. When it comes to trust, no one would trust Wu Yin more than the girls. Only then did Wea turn his head and look at the old man in black who was kneeling on the ground. The smile he had when he was facing the group of girls was gone, and there was no anger because his son was almost killed by the man in front of him. There was only a strange calmness that made one's heart palpitate. Wea didn't interrogate him, nor did he question him. He just stared at the black-clothed old man. Even though there wasn't the slightest bit of magic power surging from his body, the black-clothed old man felt a heavy pressure coming from him. It made his heart tremble, and his back was instantly drenched in sweat. Just like this, after a minute had passed, the black-costume old man was unable to bear this strange silence and took the lead to speak. "I won't say anything." Clearly, no one had questioned him, but the black-clothed old man had said these words himself. Because if he didn't say such a sentence to strengthen his determination, the black-clothed elder was afraid that he would expose everything under the pressure of Wea's pressure. What the old man didn't know was that when he said it, Kaya curled his lips in mockery. A haze flashed in the eyes of the man who was beyond middle-aged. He needed to use words to strengthen his resolve. Was it that a sign that the black-clothed old man was beginning to waver? If Wea had directly interrogated him, perhaps as a peak eighth-order powerhouse, the black-robed old man might not have said anything. But now that the black-robed old man had wavered, it was hard to say what would happen next. Vea really had his ways, as expected of the emperor of the Fea Empire. "Won't say anything." Wea shook his head regretfully. His words sent chills down the spines of those who heard them. "Don't worry, I don't need you to say anything. I have plenty of ways to make the rat hiding behind you jump out." After saying that, Wea waved his hand, and two armored knights with swords in their hands pushed open the door and entered amidst the clanging sounds of footsteps. Looking at the aura on their bodies, They were actually two powerhouses of the Eighth Order. Take him down, hang him on the floating plaza, and cripple his Do Chi. The weather has been pretty good recently, and I believe the fierce sunlight will cause him to lose his mind. When the time comes, bring him to Fan Ku's side. Hearing those words, Kaya's eyes immediately lit up. An alarmed expression appeared on the black-clothed old man's face. As for the middle-aged man and the unsightly man, one's expression became even more gloomy, while the other's entire body began to tremble, revealing an expression of fear. Fan Ku was a strange magician that Vaya had met in his early days before he became the emperor. Fan Ku was said to be unique because he didn't practice any series of magic such as wind, water, fire, earth, thunder, ice, and other types of elemental magic that every magus would choose to practice, but Fan Ku didn't practice any of them. Instead, he liked to practice some side branches of magic that others rarely practiced. For example, curse-type magics were one of the magics that Fan Ku was most proficient in. If anyone offended this strange magician, it was best that they undergo a physical examination every day. Otherwise, who knew when he would secretly cast a few curses on them and torture them to death? Kaya had once seen Fan Ku take action and place a curse on a death row prisoner. The curse only had one effect, and that was itching. In the end, on that day, the death row inmate scratched his own body like a madman. His nails scratched his skin, and his flesh was dug out by himself. However, the death row inmate kept scratching himself. The next day, he scratched himself until he was covered in blood. He died with his eyes wide open. It was because Vaya had taken a fancy to Fan Ku's strange methods of torturing people that he invited him over after he became the emperor. In exchange for providing him with magic research materials, he left some troublesome matters for him to deal with. He believed that under Fan Ku's methods and under the intense sunlight, the black-clothed old man would definitely confess everything that had happened, even though he was in a state worse than death, right? Your Majesty, you can't do this. The pitiful black-clothed old man only had time to shout out this sentence before one of the powerhouses of the eighth step knocked him unconscious. The two of them then dragged the black-clothed old man away. In response, Weya and Kaya didn't even show a hint of pity. The group of young ladies continued to ignore the matter as if it didn't concern them. On the contrary, it was the middle-aged man who couldn't stand still and couldn't help but take a step forward. Your Majesty, since this person assassinated Prince Kaya, why don't we just execute him? Execute him? Weya smirked coldly as if he had expected the middle-aged man to speak up for him. Devon, you need to know that it's easy to execute these people. However, the one I want to execute is the one who instigated them. Hearing this, the man called Devon, who was beyond middle-aged, felt his heart tighten. Uncle Devon, the other party, is a traitor who tried to assassinate a direct descendant of the royal family. Don't tell me you don't intend to stand on the same side as us? Kaya said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. After all, you are a collateral descendant of the Fea royal family. Chapter 1959. A member of the Fea royal family. As soon as he said that, Hinajiku, Mikoto, Ikaros, Yakuya, and Yukinori all understood. It turned out that the mastermind behind the plot to usurp the throne, disregarding the life and death of the Fea Empire, and secretly instructing the black-robed old man to assassinate Kaya, in an attempt to let the collateral branch take the throne, was this Devon. Standing beside Devon was a pale-faced man who had been sizing up the group of girls with a filthy gaze. He had an unbearable appearance. He was Devon's son, Duratsi. Speaking of which, Devon was Wei's younger brother. Even though they had the same father, but different mothers, they were still related by blood. And Devon's son, Duratsi, could be considered Kaya's cousin. However, this pair of father and son had a tragic ending. Back then, Vair and Divin were both princes of the Fea Empire. When the previous emperor was still alive, the relationship between the two had already been at odds. The reason was simple. Devon was a genius who could reach the peak of the 7th step before the age of 20, while Weah was a super genius who could reach the 8th step before the age of 20. Whether it was strength, talent, appearance, temperament, or wisdom, his half-brother Weah had always been a level above Devon. This made Devon jealous of his older brother, to the point of madness. Later on, Devon trained with all his might. Finally, when he reached the peak of the 8th step at the age of 45, he thought he could finally catch up to Weah. Who would have thought that Weah was destined to be a level above him? When Devon reached the peak of the 8th step, Weah immediately broke through to the 9th step, becoming a powerhouse of the 9th step. From that moment on, Devon understood that he had lost. He had completely lost to Weah. Just like how the current patriarch of the 3 great clans of the empire had to be at the peak of the 8th step. Only by suppressing the rest of the family would they be able to keep their subordinates in check. To become the emperor of the 3 great empires, the most basic requirement was to reach the 9th step. Therefore, from the moment Weah reached the 9th step, the next emperor of the Faya Empire was destined to be Weah's. Devon could only obediently become a branch family descendant, forever living in Via's shadow. However, Devon did not give up. Instead, he set his sights on the position of the next emperor. Collateral relatives did not have the qualifications to inherit the throne. However, he had just said that he wanted to become the emperor of the 3 great empires. The most basic requirement was to ascend to the 9th stage. As long as someone from the branch family reached the 9th stage, they would still be able to obtain the throne and become the emperor. Thus, after giving birth to his son, Duratsi, Devon had invested all his energy into him. He gave him all the good things and tried his best to obtain the good things that he didn't have. He followed Duratsi's every whim and doted on Duratsi to the point that he was afraid of dropping or melting in his mouth. As a result, tragedy befell Devon. Because of Devon's pampering, Duratsi had completely turned into a hedonistic son of rich parents. Not only did he not work hard, but he often relied on his identity as a second generation to bully men and tyrannize women. It couldn't be said that he didn't commit all sorts of crimes, but he was extremely lecherous. In broad daylight, he would take advantage of women. Fortunately, Devon did not punish him. Instead, Kaya, who couldn't stand Duratsi's actions, suppressed him every day. Otherwise, the royal family's face would have been completely lost. Originally, this wasn't a big deal. Devon wasn't a good person, and he didn't care about his son's evil deeds. In order to ascend to the 9th rank, seize the throne, and return him to the direct line of descent, defeating Weah was enough. Devon didn't care about the rest. In the end, tragedy befell Devon. As a hedonistic son of a rich family, Duratsi had spent a great deal of effort to nurture him. He had even used all sorts of heavenly materials and earthly treasures to nurture him. But now, Duratsi had only reached the 5th step. Yes, 5th stage. Was this a genius? To reach the 5th stage before the age of 20, one could be considered a genius in the Spalier world. However, if one were to be placed in the cradle of geniuses, the Spalier World Academy, one would simply be laughed at. And this was only after Devon had thrown a lot of heavenly treasures into Duratsi's body. Otherwise, Duratsi might not even have reached the 3rd order by now. Was Duratsi's talent weak? Actually, it wasn't weak. Even if he couldn't compare to Kaya, thanks to his royal bloodline, Duratsi's innate talent wasn't much worse than Kaya's. If there was something to be blamed, it would be this unambitious, lazy person whose mind was filled with women. He had no intention of cultivating diligently at all, always half-heartedly doing his work, spending most of his time looking for women. In the Spalier world, no, it should be said that no matter which world it was, if one wanted to achieve great things, talent was important. However, hard work was not something that could be lacking. An expert could lack talent, but they definitely couldn't lack hard work. Thus, even if Duratsi's talent was greater than Kaya's, if he didn't cultivate hard, he wouldn't be able to stand out. Not to mention, his talent was weaker than Kaya's. It was because of Duratsi's cowardice that Devon could only harden his heart and send out a black, clothed elder to assassinate Kaya. As long as Kaya died, Weya, who only had one daughter left, would have no choice but to hand over the throne. This was the cause of everything. Devon had thought that the assassination would fail, but the black-clothed elder was his trusted aide. He wouldn't expose him. Even if Weya knew who the mastermind was, Devon didn't have any evidence, so he wasn't worried. However, Weya was still more skilled. Now, Devon had no confidence that he wouldn't be exposed. Thinking of this, the gloomy Devon could only helplessly make a decision. He glanced at the girls standing to the side and ignored Kaya's mocking words. He changed the topic. Who are these ladies? The group of girls were all startled. They hadn't expected that the topic would suddenly involve them. Kaya's face was also full of surprise. Weya was the only one who took a deep look at Devon and said faintly, "These ladies are all guests from the capital of alternate generations. You might not understand, but you should know Wu Yin, right?" Wu Yin. Devon paused for a moment before his expression changed. Ilu Empire's Princess Sylph's fiancé, the youngest Type 9 powerhouse in history? These ladies are Sir Wu Yan's confidants. The capital of alternate generations is a faction established by Sir Wu Yan. Weya nodded. Even though only a few of us council elders know of its existence, with Sir Wu Yan and that lord around, the capital of alternate generations is the strongest faction in the Spalier world outside of the three empires. It's best if you get to know them. When Devon heard this, his expression changed again. As a member of the Fia Empire's royal family, Weya's younger brother and Kaya's uncle, Devon's status was second only to Weya. He knew about the Lord Weya was talking about. Yakumo Yukari, the sixth demigod in the Spalier world. Rumor has it that this demigod didn't join any faction. Her origins were mysterious and elusive. However, she was especially fond of Ilu Empire's Princess Sylph's fiancé, the youngest Tier 9 fighter in history, Wu Yan. She even supported him from behind. Because of the support of such a demigod, the higher-ups of Silveria, who knew of Yukari's existence, thought that Wu Yan was her direct disciple. That, coupled with his talent, allowed him to become the youngest Tier 9 in the history of Silveria. If these girls were backed by a demigod powerhouse and the youngest powerhouse of the ninth step in history, then Devon really couldn't ignore them. Just as Devon was about to say something, Hinajiku suddenly spoke up from the group of girls. "Your Majesty, if you're done with your discussion, please give us some time. We have important news to tell you." Weya and Kaya's gazes froze. Devon's expression stiffened. Only Derazire was still looking at the girls with glowing eyes. It was easy to understand why Devon's expression froze. More accurately, Chuju's words were easy to understand. She was hinting for Devon to step down. Devon took a deep breath. He didn't say anything and just opened his mouth. "Since your Majesty and the ladies have important matters to discuss, then we'll take our leave." Weya and Kaya did not say anything, and the group of girls did not pay any attention to Devon, causing a trace of anger to flash in Devon's eyes. He pulled a reluctant Daratsi and walked out. Chapter 1960. Bang! With the sound of the door closing, the door to the hall was also shut tight, isolating the two worlds and blocking out the sounds from the two worlds. 23WX, almost immediately, Devon's expression darkened. He clenched his fists and snorted coldly, his voice filled with anger. Devon was truly angry. He was angry at the black-robed elder for not doing his job well. Nuya's methods were sharp. Of course, he was most angry at the group of young ladies for not giving him any face. Everything was going to go wrong. "Nuya, don't be happy too early," Devon said viciously. "You might have been able to suppress me in the past, but now that the magical beast army is attacking, even if you don't like me, you won't be able to focus on me. In this chaotic moment, I don't believe that I can't find a chance to pull you down from your pedestal." It had to be said that this sentence was both crazy and stupid. What was crazy about? Naturally, it was because Devon had decided to disregard the safety of the Fea Empire when the magical beast army was attacking the Fea Empire. He had even wholeheartedly wanted to harm his own people. What was stupid about that? He didn't even understand the principle of interdependence. Wasn't Devon stupid? From this point alone, Devon was destined to be inferior to Nuya. It was unknown if he knew his own limits, but after a series of vicious words, Devon didn't calm down. Not only did Devon not calm down, the anger in his eyes grew stronger and stronger. In the end, it was so strong that anyone with a bit of observation power could see it. Unfortunately, there was only one person present who was blind. Not to mention a bit of observation skills, he might even have a problem with his eyesight. "Hey, father," Durazzi spoke with some excitement. "I want those women." That one sentence completely ignited Devon's anger. "Idiot!" To prevent his voice from reaching the hall, Devon lowered his voice. He turned all the anger in his heart into a low roar. "Do you think you can touch any woman?" Because Devon had invested too much energy in Durazzi, he had no choice but to leave. She had placed too much hope on Durazzi and doted on him. When she found out that Durazzi's life was ruined, she didn't care about him at all. Therefore, Durazzi had never been yelled at by Devon before. Hence, Devon's beast-like roar caused Durazzi's heart to skip a beat and his face to turn pale. With a plop sound, his legs went soft, and he fell to the ground. His face was filled with terror. Seeing Durazzi's cowardly appearance, Devon was both furious and disappointed. But when he thought of Devia's son, Kaya's excellence, his fury and disappointment turned into hatred. He clenched his teeth and coldly said, "Listen, I don't care which women you want to mess with, but you'd better not touch the women inside." After saying that, Devon didn't want to look at Durazzi anymore and turn around to leave. If the pseudo-Beast King leading the magical beast army knew that the pseudo-god-level Beast King was being sealed in the capital of alternate generations by 5 demigod-level fighters, I'm afraid that he would immediately abandon the Fea Empire and lead the magical beast army to attack the capital of alternate generations. Other than Miss Linya, we are here for ourselves. Before we came to Fea Empire, Yukari told us that it would be best if we could kill the Beast King. Even if we couldn't, we had to keep him here. We can't let him go to the otherworldly capital. Mikoto's voice was resolute, and her forehead flashed with electricity. Otherwise, if they affect the seal and allow the semi-divinity realm Beast Kings to break out of the seal, we'll be doomed. That's right. Ka had recovered from the sudden bad news and nodded heavily. Even though the guardian deity isn't here and the situation isn't looking good for us, a demigod Beast King is still much easier to deal with than a demigod Beast King. Since the demigod Beast King is sealed by 5 demigods and Lady Linya is working hard for the sake of Silveria, we can't admit defeat to a demigod Beast King. Hearing Ka's words, the group of girls nodded in agreement. Actually, their thoughts were similar to Ka's. In order to deal with the Beast King, so that the Misaka sisters and the girls in the capital of alternate generations could live a carefree and happy life, Wu Yin must be working hard in various dungeon worlds. Since that was the case, even if the girls couldn't do anything to the demigod Beast King, they had to stall the demigod Beast King. They couldn't let him go to the capital of a different era. That was the determination in the girls' hearts. Then, Wea couldn't possibly object and looked at the girls. "Ladies, do you have any ideas on how to deal with the Beast King?" The girls looked at each other. Then Hinajiku and Mikoto stepped forward. "Actually, we came up with a plan while we were on our way here. About half an hour later, Chuju Mikoto, Ikuros, Yugiya, and Yushin came out of the palace and walked down a golden corridor." "Hey!" Yugiya couldn't help but speak up. "Is that Beast King really that strong? So strong that we have to do this?" "He's definitely stronger than you think," Chuju said seriously. "At least, I think even if the 5 of us work together, we won't be able to defeat him." "Wow, Yushin didn't know he was that strong." Yushin looked at Mikoto. "Is he stronger than Master?" Mikoto opened her mouth and was about to say something when a group of people came out from the corner and blocked the girls' path. The one leading them was Durazzi with a proud smile on his face. Chapter 1961. The group of girls who were chatting stopped in their tracks and looked at the group of people who were blocking their way. The expressions on their faces all disappeared. Rushing out from the side, blocking the path of the girls, was a group of people wearing armor with swords at their waists. They seemed to be from a knight regiment. There were about 20 of them, and each of them seemed to be above 30. Their aura was faintly discernible, and one could tell at a glance that they weren't people to be trifled with. Without needing to use the system's perception ability, the group of girls sensed the aura of these 20 knights and instantly saw through their strength. 18 peak of the 7th step. The remaining 2 stood beside Durazzi, one on the left and one on the right. They were slightly older than the rest of the knights. At first glance, they should be middle-aged or above. Their auras were more stable and obscure. From time to time, traces of light would flash across their eyes. Obviously, they were much more powerful than the rest of the knights. The level of these 2 middle-aged knights was indeed higher than the other knights, between level 70, 72, reaching the 8th step. As for Derazir, the group of girls didn't even want to look at him. He was nothing more than trash. Of course, the more they didn't look at Derazir, the more Derazir became arrogant. He thought that the other party didn't dare to look him in the eye, afraid of offending him. This was the same as when he bullied people in the past. It was a fixed plot. Therefore, Derazir unscrupulously swept his fanatical gaze over the group of girls, especially when his gaze swept over Ikaros and Shixian's protruding chest. The fanaticism in his eyes directly turned into lust, and he couldn't help but reach out his hands to the girls. This time, the girls couldn't ignore Durazzi anymore. Swoosh! Everyone's gazes converged on Durazzi's body. The faintly discernible pressure also converged on Durazzi's body through their gazes. This made Derazir's body stiffen, and he couldn't move. Seeing this, the 2 middle-aged knights of the 8th step standing on the left and right of Derazir raised their brows and glanced at each other. They seemed unwilling to stand out. That was only natural. As powerhouses of the 7th step and above, these knights more or less had their own dignity. The knights didn't mind protecting someone who was weaker than them. They didn't even mind obeying someone who was weaker than them. However, Durazzi wasn't just weak. He bullied the weak and feared the strong. He was abnormally lecherous. He was a hedonistic son of a rich family. Such a person. Who would think highly of him? If he hadn't been ordered by Devon to protect this useless second generation who was destined to be a good-for-nothing for the rest of his life. Not to mention the 2 Type 8 powerhouses, even the 18 peak Type 7 powerhouses would not be willing. It had to be said that Devon had indeed placed great importance on Durazzi. He had actually given his son 20 guards, 2 of which were powerhouses of the 8th step, and the rest were all powerhouses of the 7th step. This was already a treatment that ordinary princes could not enjoy. The guards in charge of protecting Derazir didn't seem to know that Devon was completely disappointed in Derazir, even though he was unwilling. He had no choice but to stand out. Immediately, the 2 powerhouses of the 8th step stepped forward, as if protecting Durazzi behind them. They blocked in front of Durazzi, blocking the faintly discernible pressure from the group of girls. At this moment, Durazzi's stiff body finally loosened. He rubbed his shoulder and said with some doubt, "Have you been too tired recently?" This second-generation young master thought that the reason why he couldn't move was because his body became sluggish. Pucci, Chuju, Mikoto, Yakuya, and Yushin were all stunned for a moment. Then, they couldn't help but laugh. Clearly, they were prostrating at Durazzi's feet in all sorts of ways. When the group of girls smiled, their heroic, beautiful, and gentle appearances were displayed. This caused Durazzi's eyes to widen and his mouth to open. Drool actually flowed out of his mouth. The laughter of the girls stopped abruptly. Seeing Durazzi's sluggish appearance, they couldn't help but feel disgusted. Without saying anything, they turned around and left. In all fairness, whether it was Chuju, Mikoto, Yakuya, or Yushin, although they were all kind, their tempers weren't very good. If it was any other time, they would have already flipped out. Why would they wait until now? Under such circumstances, Durazzi was actually able to make the group of girls not flip out. One could imagine how bad their impression of him was. Stop right there. When Durazzi saw the group of girls turn around and leave, he immediately called out, "Who allowed you to leave?" As soon as these words were spoken, the peak seventh-order powerhouses standing behind Durazzi seemed to have gotten used to it. They leaped up and surrounded the group of girls in a flash. Looking at their practiced movements, it was clear that they had done this many times in the past. Being surrounded like this, the group of girls could only helplessly stop again. Unable to hold back any longer, Yi Juya abruptly turned around and pointed at Durazzi. "How dare you block our way? How is it? Amazing, right?" Durazzi's nose was pointed towards the sky. He was so arrogant that no one could bear to look at him. It was as if he was the one who stopped the girls. "Let me tell you, this prince has taken a liking to you. Obediently return with this prince." "You're mocking me? You like me?" Shixien narrowed her eyes and looked expressionlessly at the smug Durazzi. "But Shixien hates you." Durazzi's smug expression froze on his face. "What a coincidence." Chuju also said with a smile. "I hate you too." Hateful. Mikoto opened her mouth in disgust. "If I can, I really want to punch you twice." Yiju sure crossed his arms and smiled evilly. His words had offended everyone present. "Do you commoners also want to taste my pitch-black demonic spear?" Hearing that, the group of peak Type 7 powerhouses who had been expressionless and numb to do things for Durazzi were enraged. The two Type 8 powerhouses also frowned, while Durazzi was trembling in anger as he cried out, You dare to call me a commoner." Jeijuya laughed maniacally. Just as he was about to continue attacking Durazzi with his Chinibu speech, he was stopped by Chuju. "That's enough. Don't waste your time on people like him." Chuju shook her head. "We still have things we need to prepare." Mikoto, Yiju sure, and Shixien glanced at the furious Durazzi. Recalling his pale face and the way he was drooling just now, they also felt that it was a waste of time to stay with such a person. They nodded. "This prince is pissed to death. This prince is pissed to death." Because of Devon's endless pampering, he didn't discipline or guide him strictly. With his status as a branch prince, everyone outside has to give in to him, fear him, and even listen to his orders. When has Durazzi ever been treated like this? Because of this, after being yelled at by Devon for the first time, Durazzi started to have rebellious thoughts. Now that the group of girls are ignoring Durazzi's eyes were filled with hatred as he shouted, "Capture all of them! I will enjoy them immediately." Enjoy? What does that mean? It's self-explanatory. This time, other than Ikaros who didn't react at all, Chuju, Mikoto, Yiju sure, and Shixien were also angered. But before they could do anything, one of the two Tier 8 fighters spoke up. "Prince Durazzi, Prince Kaya said before that if you use forceful means to coerce others, he won't let you go. Did you forget?" Durazzi shrunk his head back. Fear flashed in his eyes. Kaya doesn't like Durazzi. He once said openly that if Durazzi dares to use forceful means to coerce others, he'll show him who's boss. If it wasn't for Kaya's words, who knows how many girls would have suffered at Durazzi's hands already. Durazzi also seemed to be afraid of Kaya, but when he saw the country-toppling beauty of these girls and recalled his father's yelling at him, Durazzi hardened his heart and shouted, "Who cares? At most, I'll just kill them after I'm done with them. I'll just silence them." The girls' gazes finally turned cold. Chapter 1962. Originally, Chuju, Mikoto, Ikaros, Yugiya, and the other girls didn't have a good impression of Derazir, but they didn't think of doing anything to him. This wasn't strange. Among the 5 young ladies, every single one of them was kind-hearted. Even Yijuya and Shixien, who were elves and wouldn't be affected by the deaths of strangers, wouldn't want to kill them just because they were disgusted by them a few times. Because of this, Derazir was able to survive until now. If Wu Yin was here and saw Derazir looking at his wives with such disgusting eyes, he wouldn't care about the Prince of Fea Empire side family. He might even castrate Derazir on the spot. If Divin stepped out to stop him, he would take care of both of them. Wea, Kaya, and Fea Empire's side family wouldn't fall out with the capital of alternate generations just because of these 2 side family members. And now, the girls were really angry. Derazir popped out of nowhere and said that he wanted to take them back and enjoy them. He even dared to silence them? The girls only met Derazir today, not to mention offending him. They didn't even exchange a few words. Not only is this person a coward, his heart is also so vicious. Now, the girl's impression of him was no longer bad. Instead, it was extremely bad. Derazir didn't know that he had offended someone he shouldn't have. He yelled at the guards beside him in exasperation. "What are you waiting for?" Hearing this, the two Tier 8 fighters and the group of Tier 7 knights looked at each other. Even though their eyes were filled with annoyance, they still obediently did as they were told. "Little girl, don't blame us." One of the Tier 8 fighters even said indifferently, "If you want to blame someone, you can only blame your bad luck." With that person waved his hand. A group of knights at the peak of the 7th step gathered together without taking any weapons. They didn't use any dochi and just grabbed them with their bare hands. Needless to say, when these people saw that the group of girls were so young, they all thought that they were pushovers. That's true. Makoto lowered her head. His short brown bangs flashed with electric arcs. "If you want to blame someone, you can only blame your bad luck." As soon as she finished speaking, Makoto abruptly raised her slightly angry face. Her body suddenly flashed violently with blue and white lightning. Beep, beep, beep. Amidst the loud sound of electricity, arcs of electric arcs the size of an arm suddenly flashed, as if a tornado was expanding in all directions. As the strong blue and white light flickered, it brushed against the ground and swept to the surroundings. It struck a group of peak Type 7 powerhouses who could not react in time. Beep, beep, beep. Another electric sound was heard, but this time, it came from the knights at the peak of the 7th step who were covered in violent electric arcs. Blue and white lightning leaped around the peak of the 7th step knights, mercilessly attacking their bodies, causing them to scream in agony. The two powerhouses at the 8th step had a drastic change in expression, but before they could say anything, the indiscriminate electric arcs that swept through the surroundings also shot towards their direction, causing their pupils to shrink. They hurriedly raised their swords and hurriedly circulated their do-chi. Bang! Along with a neat, overlapping sound, a muffled sound was heard. Thick electric arcs violently struck the swords of the two powerhouses at the 8th step. Oomph! The two powerhouses only felt an unparalleled force from the swords in their hands, causing them to groan and stagger back a few steps. It wasn't until they retreated in front of Darcy that they stabilized themselves. Their eyes were filled with horror as they looked at Makoto. Bam, 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 bam. The group of peak Type 7 powerhouses fell to the ground one by one, emitting smoke all over their body. Their eyes rolled back, and with scorch marks, they fell to the ground, unable to get up again. From the beginning to the end, Darcy didn't react to what happened. His face was full of confusion, and he even cried out, Why are you all down? Hurry up and get up to capture them." Hearing this, the two powerhouses at the 8th step really wanted to send Darcy flying with a kick. Don't you understand? They kicked an iron plate. The two powerhouses could only stare at Makoto, who was stroking her bangs, her body flashing with blue and white electric arcs. "Who the hell are you?" "It doesn't matter who I am." Makoto snorted coldly. She stretched out her hand and lightly tossed 2 shiny silver coins. It was clearly a simple action, but it caused the two powerhouses to have goosebumps all over their body. "Didn't you want to attack us? Then come face to face." Such a bold statement caused the two powerhouses of the 8th step to feel their chests tighten. Anger appeared on their faces as they felt like they were being looked down upon. They even forgot about the feeling of goosebumps. Instead, they raised their swords and charged towards Makoto with a loud roar. As the saying goes, one is marked by the company one keeps. Although these two powerhouses and the 18 peak Type 7 powerhouses looked down on Darcy, they still followed his orders. Their actions of helping a villain cause trouble had already made them into jackals of the same lair as Darcy. Who knew if they had really been infected by Doratzi's disease of having no limit to intelligence? Even after knowing that they had kicked an iron plate, they still foolishly rushed forward. It had to be said that these two powerhouses of the eighth step were truly unbearable. No wonder they would walk together with Daratzi. In response, Mikoto wanted to make a move and ruthlessly deal a killing blow to the two powerhouses, but someone else beat her to it. Gee! Amidst the sonic boom, two figures that were almost identical turned into afterimages, their bodies shrouded in gusts of wind. In a flash, they appeared in front of the two Type 8 powerhouses and kicked out at their chests. Pump! Before they could even let out a scream, the two powerhouses of the 8th stage who were helping the tyrant were sent flying by this kick. They were less than a meter away from Daratzi as they flew out fiercely. Finally, they smashed into the wall at the end of the corridor. Their heads tilted as they fainted. Clap, clap, clap. Yi Juya clapped his hands lightly as if he was dusting off the dust on his hands. He curled his lips. So weak, I feel the same. Shi Xian patted her skirt, although she still had a half-asleep and lazy appearance. And even her tone was soft and powerless. The disdain and arrogance in her words were almost exactly the same as Yi Juya's. Dealt with in one move, you all. Daratzi's mouth trembled as he looked at the guards who had fallen to the ground. Then he looked at the group of young girls who were looking at him with a smile that was not a smile. His face paled as he cried out in panic. Get up! Get up! Protect me! Seeing this scene, the gazes of the group of young ladies towards Daratzi changed from faint smiles to pity. He was destined to be a clown who would never amount to anything in his life. At that moment, Mikoto waved her fingers and walked past the guards, as well as Yagiya and Shi Xian, towards Daratzi. You, what are you trying to do? Darcy's face was filled with fear as he looked at the approaching Mikoto. His legs trembled as he retreated step by step. He even tried to put up a brave front as he screamed. I'm the Prince of Fia Empire. If you dare to touch me, Fia Empire will not let you off. However, Daratzi's threatening words didn't cause fear and panic like he had imagined. Instead, it caused Mikoto's expression to become dissatisfied. A trace of disdain slowly surfaced in her brown eyes. You. Daratzi's heart grew more and more panicked. He stumbled and sat on the ground. As he moved back, he kept shaking his head. Slowly, his eyes became moist. Even his pants were wet. Help! Help! So noisy. Seeing Daratzi's unbearable performance, Mikoto's disgust for a person reached its peak for the first time. With a shout, an electric current shot out from her body and heavily hit Daratzi's body. Beep beep. Ah! In the next moment, the screams of a pig being slaughtered echoed throughout the palace. Finally, it startled everyone and caused a complete commotion in the palace. Chapter 1963. When the screams echoed throughout the Fea Imperial Palace, no matter if it was the members of the Fea Imperial family living in the Imperial Palace, or those who happened to be in the Imperial Palace, or even the servants in the Imperial Palace, they were all shocked when they heard the screams. Those who were slightly slower were astonished. Why would such a blood-curdling scream be heard from the palace? Those with sharp senses immediately realized that something had happened. However, they didn't understand who dared to cause trouble in the palace. Devon belonged to the latter. Originally, Devon was still walking to his bedroom while thinking about how to establish a relationship with the capital of a different era to obtain the support of the capital of a different era to pull Weya down from his position. However, before he could come up with a result, an extremely tragic cry resounded, startling Devon. What's wrong? Devon stared blankly as he didn't understand who dared to cause trouble in the palace. But shortly after, his expression changed. The blood-curdling scream was extremely mournful, but Devon still recognized the owner of the voice. If it wasn't his useless son, who else could it be? Devon had a bad premonition as soon as he recognized his son's voice. Indeed, Devon had pushed all the blame for Daratzi's failure to live up to expectations. He didn't feel that it was his fault at all and had given up on Daratzi. But giving up on Daratzi didn't mean that Devon wouldn't care about his son. After all, no matter how useless Daratzi was, Devon's blood flowed in Durazzi's veins. Devon only had Durazzi as his only son and was counting on him to carry on the family line. Therefore, as long as Durazzi could bear children, nothing else mattered. And now, after hearing Durazzi's blood-curdling scream, Devon had a bad premonition. Devon knitted his brows deeply. Without hesitation, dense mana surged from Devon's body as he cast a speed-increasing wind-type spell. He darted toward the direction where the blood-curdling scream came from, even though the palace was huge. But Durazzi's speed was terrifyingly fast after casting a spell. Furthermore, as Devon had been considering how to establish a relationship with the capital of otherworldly beings, he didn't travel too far and arrived at the scene in just 10 seconds. Shortly after, Devon's expression changed once again, and this time, it was a drastic change. The first thing that caught his eye was Chuju, Mikoto, Ikaros, Yakiya, Yuxian, and the other young ladies who were still standing at the scene. Around the group of girls, knights in armor and swords were lying unconscious on the ground. At the end of the corridor where the girls were at, there were two middle-aged knights who were embedded into the wall. Their eyes were rolled back, and it was obvious that they wouldn't wake up in a short period of time. In front of the group of girls, or to be more precise, in front of Mikoto, was Durazzi. He was foaming at the mouth, his eyes were lifeless, and his mouth was filled with saliva. The ground beneath him was completely soaked, and his body was emitting light smoke. He looked like a fool, and had also fainted. Devon's have. Even if Devon used his knee to think, he could roughly guess what happened. But that was the thing that Devon didn't want to see the most. If it was really as Devon thought, that idiot Durazzi didn't listen to him and went to provoke the young ladies of the capital of otherworldly beings, then his plan to establish a relationship with the capital of otherworldly beings would be ruined by Durazzi. No, not only would it be ruined, it might even push this huge helper to the side of Wea. That was something that Devon didn't want to see even if he died. That idiot. Devon could only swallow his bitterness. As he listened to the sounds of footsteps and disturbances gathering around him, he gritted his teeth and rushed forward. Ladies, please stop. The group of young ladies who were looking at Durazzi's unbearable appearance with disdain raised their heads and looked at Devon, who was standing in front of Durazzi. Their expressions were unsightly. Seeing this, Devon's heart sank once more. He glanced at Durazzi, who was drooling and had a dazed expression. Even the floor under his crotch was drenched wet. The anger in his heart soared. He knew that he had lost a lot of face this time. Sure enough, many people who heard the commotion gathered on both sides of the corridor. Looking at Durazzi's unbearable appearance and Devon, who was confronting the group of young ladies, they pointed and whispered as though they had expected this to happen. Actually, no matter who it was, as long as they knew how unbearable Durazzi was, they would be able to guess the whole process of the matter. Thus, the onlookers all pointed at Durazzi, their eyes and faces filled with disdain and disgust. Even Devon, who was standing in front of Durazzi, seemed to be standing up for Durazzi, was looked at with strange gazes, and the noise became louder and louder. What are you all doing? At this moment, at one end of the corridor, the spectators who had gathered there made a path in fear and trepidation. Waya and Kaya walked in from outside. Seeing this scene, their faces darkened. Obviously, if the crowd could guess what was going on, it's impossible for the emperor and prince to not guess it. Ladies! Kaya immediately stepped forward and hurriedly called out. What's going on? Chuju, Ikaros, Yagoya, and Yushin didn't speak. Only Mikoto, who crossed her arms, suddenly spoke. This guy brought people to stop us. He threatened to take us back and enjoy us. He even said that he would kill us to silence us. That's why we took him down. When she said that, Wea, Kaya, and Devon's faces turned ugly. The three of them had thought that Durazzi couldn't hold back his lust and had brought people to tease the group of girls. However, because Kaya had once suppressed Durazzi and warned him not to use forceful methods to force others, Durazzi had probably just been rude and had been taught a lesson by the group of girls, who knew that Durazzi not only planned to kidnap the girls, he even planned to silence them. This isn't something that can be solved with a few lessons. Uncle Devon, before Wea could say anything, Kaya spoke first. Your good son sure has guts. After being provoked by Ka's words, Devon's face became more and more unsightly. His anger towards Durazzi also became more and more intense. He took a few deep breaths and forced out a smile. Ladies, it's my fault for not teaching him well. I apologize on behalf of my useless son. Devon still didn't think it was enough and continued with gritted teeth. This is his own fault. He should take responsibility for it. That's why I'll leave this idiot to you ladies to deal with. An uproar immediately broke out in the crowd. Even the group of girls, Wea and Kaya, were stunned. What's the meaning of this? Is Devon not going to plead for his son? What they didn't know was that Devon had already given up on his son. Now, he was prepared to sacrifice his son in exchange for the favor of the girls. This wasn't surprising. To Devon, Durazzi was only useful for producing offspring. If Durazzi was to die, Devon might consider it. But Devon felt that the girls wouldn't directly kill Durazzi. Thus, he made this decision. This way, not only would he be able to appease the anger of the girls, he would also be able to increase the favor of the capital of another generation. It would be more beneficial for him when he interacted with them in the future. Why not? As for what would happen to Durazzi, Devon didn't care. As long as he didn't die or get castrated, anything was fine. However, Devon was measuring the heart of a gentleman with the yardstick of a villain. If Wu Yin was here, he would have given Durazzi an unforgettable lesson. But the girls were kind-hearted. Their anger had mostly dissipated after Makoto taught Durazzi a lesson. Naturally, they had no interest in Durazzi. No need. Chuju frowned and waved her hand as if she didn't want to see Durazzi. Take him away. Don't let us see him in the future. Hinajiku's original intention was to let Durazzi off the hook, but this sentence made Devon's heart tighten. Could it be that these girls from the capital of another generation weren't willing to let this go and wanted to pursue the matter? You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.